Chapter 451, Master, I had a dream. Chapter 451, Master, I had a dream. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. The vast cosmos was filled with dazzling stars, swirling galaxies, and the infrequent meteors and adrift dust. They all pointed to how real everything was. Sudden confusion and bewilderment overwhelmed the recently awakened Wang Baoli and shone in his eyes. Before he could speak, the elder standing in front of him turned around. His kind gaze met Wang Baoli's eyes, causing Wang Baoli to freeze. The elder's voice was like a slight breeze that brushed past Wang Baoli's body and sank into his soul. It made Wang Baoli shudder suddenly. Then, a flood of memories surged in his mind. It swept away his bewilderment and the remnants of his dreamscape. He seemed to have truly awakened then. He remembered his name in those dreams. He was called Wang Baoli. He had come from the planet Sang Lun and had entered the Dark Sect when he was 7 years old, becoming a disciple of the Dark Sect's inner sect. The elder before him was his master, one of the 9 Grand Elders of the current generation of the Dark Sect. He was called Ming Kunzi. He was his master's youngest disciple. His master had brought him away from the Dark Planet to a planet that was about to pass. They were headed there to ferry the dead souls on behalf of the heavenly Tao. They were to bring balance to life and death. To guide souls to their rebirth, that was the Dark Sect's mission. The Dark Sect wielded the power of death in the universe, which was why the disciples of every generation needed to learn the ways to ferry the dead. That was why his master had brought him along, so that he might witness the entire process with his own eyes and gain greater knowledge of the dark art. All his memories surged to his mind at that moment, and Wang Baoli took a deep breath. He was no longer lost, but fully awake. However, he still couldn't forget what he had dreamt. As his master looked at him with kind eyes and spoke to him in a kind voice, Wang Baoli got to his feet hastily and bowed. Master! I had a dream just now. When I woke up, I was slightly lost, and I couldn't tell if everything that had happened in the dream was true or merely an illusion, Wang Baoli said. He felt uneasy since he had fallen asleep in front of his master. He might get a scolding from the latter for that. The elder gazed meaningfully at Wang Baoli, then shook his head and smiled. What dream? Ah? Wang Baoli released a sigh of relief when he realized his master didn't intend to reprimand him. After some thought, Wang Baoli began to recall everything that had happened in his dream. The look in his eyes gradually grew distant. He seemed to be remembering. After a long while, he spoke softly. Master, it was a strange dream. In the dream, I was also called Wang Baoli, but I wasn't in the Dark Sect. I don't know how many years had passed, but I was on a planet called Earth. The greatest sect, there was something called the Federation. I remember that in my dream, I had an ambition. I wanted to become the Federation President. Right, the Federation President was something like the sect lord of that sect. After saying that, Wang Baoli seemed slightly embarrassed. He felt his ambition in his dreams was quite a load of rubbish. Don't misunderstand, Master. This isn't a case of my thoughts in the day appearing in my dreams at night. My dream is to become the sect lord of the Dark Sect. This will never change. Who cares about the Federation President? It's just a whole load of dogshit *t. Wang Baoli hurriedly thudded his chest and proclaimed loudly. The elder stared at Wang Baoli, with what was seemingly a smile on his face. He didn't say anything. Wang Baoli seemed slightly sheepish when he saw the smile on his master's face. He thought about changing the subject and hurriedly said, Master, don't you find it strange? I, Wang Baoli, am the most good-looking in the entire Dark Sect. In my dream, I was also the most good-looking in the entire Federation. In my dream, countless beautiful women went head over heels for me. They adored me and wanted to have my children. What a chore! Wang Baoli sighed. Master, I'm already living like this in the Dark Sect. I've had enough of it. Who knew that it would be the same in my dreams? What do you think I should do? I'm so troubled. Wang Baoli had intended to change the topic, but as he went on, he became distracted by his own words. The expression on the elder beside him grew strange. In the end, he could listen to Wang Baoli no more, so he coughed. The sound of the cough echoed in Wang Baoli's mind and interrupted what he was saying. Baoli, we've arrived. As he said that, the elder raised his right hand towards the skies before them and waved. A loud deafening boom thundered in what had been a peaceful starlit sky. It seemed unable to withstand the elder's power. It was as if a pair of invisible hands had ripped the skies apart, and an enormous tear appeared in the heavens before the elder. It was as long as a planet and split open like a wide chasm. One could hardly see where it ended if one stood too near it. From afar, it looked like a scar inflicted on the universe. The sight sent Wang Baoli reeling in shock. His breathing quickened. He couldn't imagine the extent of power required to create such an awesome sight. Not to mention, the elder had only waved his hand. The tear that he created was enough to destroy an entire planet. That wasn't the end of it. Through the tear, Wang Baoli could distinctly see another world lying beyond. Perhaps it might be more accurate to say that this tear was like a form of teleportation. The world within lay an immense distance away from where they were. The universe within the tear contained a single planet, one that was red in color and exuded an extreme heat. One could vaguely see a civilization present on the planet. There were countless lives on it. However, this civilization was about to experience mass sorrow and despair. This was because a huge meteor had just crashed into the planet. The planet shuddered. It didn't collapse or disintegrate, but calamity descended. It swept across the entire planet and countless people perished. As these lives faded, their souls littered the heavens, some even drifting further into the stars. The living couldn't see them, but they were clear to the eyes of one from the dark sect. The countless souls of the dead wandered beyond the planet, amongst the stars. They wept and clustered together. There were countless of them. The planet faded from its deep red into a grey color. It seemed like the planet was also marching towards death. The sight stirred Wang Baoli's heart once again. He felt that this was a familiar sight. It seemed that he had seen something like this in his dreams, on a wall painting. There was a striking similarity with what he was seeing now. Baoli, you must remember, the dark sect's responsibility is to serve on behalf of the heavenly Tao and ferry the dead souls. We have to guide them to where they are supposed to go, instead of allowing them to wander the universe. Watch carefully, the elder said. He raised the lantern ore in his hand and shook it lightly. Wang Baoli couldn't tell what spell he cast, but as the lantern ore shook, the dead souls on the planet and in the universe within the tear trembled in unison. They no longer howled. They were like a drowning man who had just grabbed hold of stray straws. They seemed to have seen a lighthouse in the midst of overwhelming darkness. The dead souls turned their eyes towards the elder instantly. In the next instant, they fled towards him. Countless souls passed through the tear, traveling from one end of the universe to the boat where Wang Baoli and the elder stood. They gathered and formed a river of dead souls. It was a vast river without an end in sight. This river of souls carried the lone boat as it drifted into the distance. The tear slowly shut. As it disappeared, Wang Baoli caught a glance of the planet inside the tear. It had turned completely grey. Shocked, Wang Baoli stared at the river of souls around him before he turned and looked at his master. It was then that his master's quiet and calm voice echoed in his ear. This is the dark sect's mission. We ferry all dead souls in the entire universe. Baoli, why are you in a daze? Start singing the soul song. Wang Baoli shuddered. He opened his mouth instinctively, and a strange melody, like a form of chanting, rang out and echoed in the heavens. It drifted alongside the river of dead souls. When the heavens and earth separate, the cycle of fate stops. Knowing what happened in the past, the one who suffers now is. Knowing what's to come in the future, the one who is working hard now is. As the song drifted into the distance, countless faces appeared within the river of dead souls. There were faces of the young and the old, of men and women. Some of them appeared to be human, others monsters. They had a look of peace on their faces. They seemed to be filled with joy. There was no pain. They gathered around the boat and moved with the soul song. They traveled into the distance, towards the dark sect. Eons ago, what had been the pinnacle and most glorious era of the dark sect. From afar, the river of souls seemed vast and endless. A lone boat drifted on the river. On it should have been two figures, one old and one young. However, at that moment, the silhouette of the elder seemed faint and slightly blurry. Only Wang Baoli's form grew ever clearer. Chapter 452, Corpse Face. Chapter 452, Corpse Face. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli's memories regarding the commencement of this journey were blurry. It seemed that his dream had seemed too real, which made everything around him now seem familiar yet foreign to him. On their way back, after he had sung the soul song repeatedly, Wang Baoli gazed at the starlit heavens. He couldn't help but think of his dream. He could vaguely remember that he had really appeared to be the most good-looking person in the Federation. He had even had a few romantic partners. Like Bunny, like Zhao Yameng, like Li Wana, like Li Yi, like Li Xiao. That's not right, Li Yi wasn't one of them. Wang Baoli thought for a bit. He was slightly confused. He remembered Li Xiao was a man, but his memories weren't clear. This sent him reeling back in shock. He was both doubtful and afraid. That's impossible, in my dreams, no, I, Wang Baoli, am not that sort of person. Wang Baoli twitched in fear. He tried to remember what had happened in his dream. He gradually recalled something. He remembered that Li Xiao was only the brother of one of his confidants. That made him sigh with relief. However, as the memories of his dream surfaced, waves of unwillingness and nostalgia surfaced in his heart unknowingly. They were feelings for his parents in his dream, his friends, his romantic partners, and the Federation. It's only a dream. Wang Baoli sighed in his heart. The elder standing in front of him turned and stared at Wang Baoli. He said softly, "Baoli, are you still thinking about the Federation in your dream?" Upon hearing that, Wang Baoli lifted his head and looked at his master. He thought for a bit, then asked, "Master, why do people dream?" This dream about the Federation felt too real. The elder stared at Wang Baoli. There was tender love on his face. He patted Wang Baoli on the head, then spoke kindly. "Baoli, as a dark child, you must know that there are no dreams in this world. What you see as a dream is but another you." "Another me?" Wang Baoli was slightly confused. He was about to question further when he looked down at his master's hand and saw a finger vanishing. He immediately forgot all about his dream. He gasped and shouted, "Master, your finger!" The elder lowered his head and looked at his finger. He smiled. There was no hint of surprise or shock in his eyes. When he gazed at Wang Baoli again, the kindness in his eyes grew. "It's all right, this is an old wound." Wang Baoli wanted to pursue the matter, but the elder had already turned around. He moved the lantern oar and set the boat drifting into the distance. Slowly, it began to cross the heavens. A long time passed, before a dazzling starlit zone appeared around them. This field of stars was littered with dazzling planets. The planets numbered in the millions. On each planet was an illusory gate many times larger than the planet. They stood on each planet and seemed to all look the same. Every gate exuded an ancient aura and looked majestic, providing a spectacular sight. From afar, one would see endless planets and hence endless gates. Rivers of souls flowed through every illusory gate, circling the field of stars. There was a large horde of cultivators flying around in the skies. They seemed to be both guides and guards. They bowed respectfully towards Wang Baoli's master when they saw the latter. It was clear from their eyes that they respected the elder deeply and genuinely. The elder found it difficult to return each greeting, only nodding slightly. He spoke softly, as if to himself and at the same time, as if trying to explain something. "This is the Gate of Rebirth." "The Gate of Rebirth," Wang Baoli murmured. He was filled with awe. The boat had brought them to the center of this galactic domain, and in the middle of it was an immense and vast planet that exceeded the size of the solar system. When Wang Baoli saw this planet, shock and awe surged through him. The planet was simply too big. It was speckled with bright, even colors, and a large horde of souls flew out from within the planet. From afar, it looked like the source of the dark river. The souls that departed from it formed a river that spread and split into smaller streams. They flowed through the multiple gates of rebirth around the planet. "This is the responsibility of the dark sect, Rebirth." The elder's calm voice rang out. Wang Baoli had long since been blown away by the sight before him. He stared with wide eyes and an open mouth until the boat entered the planet that was the size of the solar system. He then saw countless vast mountains and rivers on the surface of this planet. There was also a palace that stretched endlessly into the horizon. In the distant lands, he could see miles and miles of beasts. They didn't seem violent at all. They appeared to be peaceful beasts, and they were aiding the cultivators in constructing a majestic stone monument. The stone monument seemed to be in the beginning stages of construction. Despite that, it already seemed to stretch into the skies. It was a spectacular sight. Countless dark sect cultivators wandered the planet and in the field of stars. Everything felt strange and unfamiliar to Wang Baoli, but he kept telling himself that these were all familiar to him. The two vastly different feelings clashed inside him. His breathing grew uneven, and he felt lost and confused most of the time. Finally, his master's boat brought him to the highest mountain range on this planet. Palaces were in groups, spanning the entire width of the horizon with no end in sight. It wasn't only the land that was littered with countless grand halls and cultivators, the skies were the same. Countless palaces floated in the skies, and countless cultivators made their way around them. Enormous, Kuan-Peng-like beasts swam in the skies. Every single thing sent waves of intense emotion through Wang Baoli. He didn't even notice that his master had landed the boat outside a palace and had left him. It was only when a voice protested in his ear that Wang Baoli finally returned to reality. Why are there so many this round? We're going to be so busy. Baoli, why are you in a daze? It's not like you haven't seen this before. Quick, come over and help me. It was a youth who spoke to him. He wore black robes, and there were freckles on his face. The expression on his face was one of exasperation. He stared at the sky and at the wide river formed from the great crowd of souls that Ming Kunzi had ferried over and sighed. Wang Baoli turned his head hastily. A familiar feeling rose from his memory as he looked at the youth. He could tell that this was his senior brother, so he hurried over. Only, he didn't know what to do. After some hesitation, he asked, "Senior brother, what should I do? Are you trying to shirk your duties again?" "Baoli, there are too many dead souls this round. Your senior brother won't be able to handle them all, so you can't sneak off again this time." The youth grabbed Wang Baoli's arm and pulled him into a great hall that was half the size of a city. It was expansive, and it had 9 statues erected inside, one of which was a statue of Ming Kunzi. It was clear that the other 8 statues held the same status as Ming Kunzi, they were of the other grand elders of the dark sect. In the center of the 9 statues were bronze mirrors the size of a man. There were countless mirrors, at least 1 million of them. Before every bronze mirror sat a dark sect cultivator, who drew continuously in front of the mirror. Amongst the 1 million or so bronze mirrors, 2 mirrors stood out. They were not only bigger, but they were of a different color. The rest were all bronze while these 2 were purple. They seemed to be the primary mirrors. Wang Baoli was yanked along by his senior brother. They swept past the greetings from the rest and arrived before the 2 main mirrors. His senior brother seemed determined not to let him escape. Wang Baoli's head swelled. Everything around him seemed foreign yet familiar, but he really didn't know what he was supposed to do next. He scratched his head and asked again. "Senior brother, what exactly should I do?" The youth with freckles on his face gave Wang Baoli a deep, long look. He asked softly. "Baoli, don't you know how to draw the corpse face?" "Corpse face?" Wang Baoli shuddered. He stared at the purple mirror before him. He could see a soul forming in the mirror. It cupped its fists towards Wang Baoli, and its face was formless and without features. "Baoli, don't do a hasty job. When souls arrive here, the faces of their past lives would gradually fade away. You have to listen to the guidance of the heavenly Tao and draw them a new face. What you draw will determine what they will be born with in their next life." Having said that, the youth ignored Wang Baoli. He used his finger as a brush and painted the face on the dead soul in the mirror. Wang Baoli's breathing grew uneven. He naturally knew how to perform the dark corpse face art. What he didn't know was whether he had originally known how to do it, or if he had learned it in his dream. His memories were in a mess. He could see the dead soul waiting, so he set his thoughts aside and lifted his right hand. He shut his eyes. The dark corpse face art, which he had learned, appeared in his mind. First, the corpse eyebrow, then the corpse eyes, followed by the corpse nose and the corpse lips, finally forming the corpse face. A moment later, Wang Baoli opened his eyes. Just as right index finger was about to land as he began to start painting, a sudden consciousness descended in his mind. He could somehow see a baby girl being born on a planet. He could see her entire life, from birth to death. This wasn't the soul's past life, but that of its next. He couldn't clearly discern its fate, but he could see what it was supposed to look like. Its face etched itself into his mind as a force guided his hand. Slowly, he began to draw. Chapter 453, Senior Brother Chen Qing. Chapter 453, Senior Brother Chen Qing. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli remembered the girl to be very pretty and very good-looking. But she was too thin, it seemed as if a breeze would knock her over. Her thinness was what resulted in her weak immunity. In this strange state of consciousness, Wang Baoli seemed to remember that in her next life, she had perished because of this exact reason. Wang Baoli felt that he should help this soul while he was painting the corpse face. He added a few additional strokes while following the image that had surfaced in his memory. Finally, he was done. He looked at the chubby-looking soul in the mirror and smiled, pleased with himself. With a wave of his hand, the bewildered soul vanished, only to be replaced with another soul. Wang Baoli began his life of painting at the dark sect. He painted corpse faces every day. The fewest he painted were 10,000 faces, the most 40 to 50,000 faces a day. He had still been unfamiliar with the art, but he soon got used to it and began to paint with ease. He improved at a startling rate. He didn't even need to look at the mirror. He could simply lift his hand and paint. Such an ability would prove to be useful and extremely effective when facing opponents in battle. Time passed. It had been 2 weeks since Wang Baoli returned to the dark sect. During this period, besides painting corpse faces, the face that he saw the most was his freckle-faced senior brother. After finding out that Wang Baoli had a dream while following their master off to ferry souls, and had woken up feeling slightly confused, his senior brother, Chen Qing, expressed great sympathy towards Wang Baoli. He helped him organize his memories. This allowed Wang Baoli to slowly recollect and clarify his memories during this period. His memories prior to entering the dark sect remained vague, but his memories of the dark sect grew clearer. He knew that he wasn't only Ming Kunz's disciple but that he also had more than 100 senior brothers. They were all Ming Kunz's disciples. Their ages differed, with the eldest of them having already trained for nearly half a century. He himself had many disciples as well. Wang Baoli was the youngest of all these disciples. Despite his young age and his later admission to the sect, his rank was considerably high. This resulted in a great many disciples addressing him as Uncle Master or other respectful terms when he was in the sect. Wang Baoli felt extremely pleased with their address. This also further strengthened his resolve to become the sect lord of the dark sect. He felt that this was the path that most suited him. The Federation president was something that happened in a dream. Even though he felt it quite a loss when he thought back about it, he reminded himself that he had simply woken up too soon. Else, he firmly believed that he would have become the Federation president in his dream. As his memories of the dark sect came back to him, he also remembered the status that the dark sect held in this part of the universe. The dark sect controlled rebirth and death in this part of the universe. All that had perished were under its jurisdiction. The dark sect reigned supreme here, over countless civilizations and countless sects. It represented death. This could clearly be seen in the name of this part of the universe. It was called the Dark Universe. The universe of the dark sect. The place Wang Baoli was only formed a small part of the dark universe. The dark sect was spread out across 9 parts in the universe. These 9 starfields were scattered across space, and a Grand Elder presided over each starfield. This region was presided over by Ming Kunzi. While the dark sect was strong and powerful, the sect wasn't without its foe. Its archenemy was formed from numerous powerful entities and civilizations that didn't wish to die. As a result, they came together and formed the Never-Ending Clan. They were called the Never-Ending Clan because never-ending represented the absence of an end. It stood for their desire to live forever. There would never be a day where they would face true death. Even if they should fall from grace, they would be reborn according to their own will instead of entering the cycle of rebirth, where all traces of their past lives would be wiped away before they were reborn into the next life. The two entities were like life and death. They clashed numerous times in space. However, there seemed to be a pattern to their dance. There were never large-scale wars or battles. A balance had been struck. This was because the never-ending clan didn't have full confidence of victory against the Dark Sect. The Dark Sect had no ambitions of their own. The mission of the Dark Sect was to ferry the souls of the dead. They were to serve on behalf of the heavenly Tao. They didn't act in aggression. After all, balance was also a part of the heavenly Tao. Everything should be strange and foreign to him, but Wang Baoli could still sense familiar memories surfacing clearly in his mind. He finally had a basic grasp of the Dark Sect and the universe. He also realized what the stone monument the huge hordes of beasts and cultivators had been trying to construct on that planet was. This is the Dark Child Monument. Wang Baoli's senior brother, the freckle-faced youth, gazed at the distant stone monument and told Wang Baoli. There was a tinge of pride in his eyes when he said that, as well as a deep fervor. Dark Child, this is an identity and a symbol. Only when one becomes a Dark Child could he venture out alone and be qualified to ferry the souls of the dead. There are two ways to become a Dark Child. One is what you and I did, which is to become a disciple under the 9 Grand Elders. By doing so, you'll automatically be seen as a Dark Child. But that is only a reflection of your status, it doesn't mean that you're a real Dark Child. To become a real Dark Child, there is only one way, the second way. That is, to get your name on the Dark Child Monument. You can't do it yourself. Only a Grand Elder has the right to put a name there. After that, whether the name remains on the monument is yet another important step. This would involve the approval and recognition by the Heavenly Tao. Baoli, if the Heavenly Tao acknowledges you, your name will remain on the stone monument. If it doesn't, the Dark Child Monument will wipe it off after our Master has carved it into the monument. As for my name, our Master will carve it into the monument after this Dark Child Monument is built. I believe that the Heavenly Tao will recognize and approve of me. That's why you have to buck up, Baoli. There was a fierce light shining in Chen Qing's eyes. At this moment, he wasn't the youth that had been painting corpse faces with Wang Baoli. He was one of the disciples of Ming Kunzi, whose cultivation might not be the highest, but whose natural gifts and talents were incomparable. After regaining his memories, Wang Baoli remembered that Chen Qing's gifts were so great that they were beyond this world. The other Grand Elders in the Dark Sect had said that he had surpassed all limits. In fact, he might even become the 10th Grand Elder many years later. His cultivation was also extremely powerful currently. In Wang Baoli's memories, the Dark Sect categorized the levels of cultivation into 5 great realms: the Spirit Immortal Realm, the Planet Realm, the Eternal Star Realm, the Galaxy Realm, and the Universe Realm. Each great realm was further split into different stages. For example, the first Spirit Immortal Realm was divided into the Foundation Establishment Realm, the Core Formation Realm, the Nascent Soul Realm, the Soul Conduit Realm, and finally, the Spirit Immortal Realm. The Planet Realm, the Eternal Star Realm, and the Galaxy Realm worked the same way. The final Universe Realm was the only exception. It was mysterious and unfathomable. At present, only the 9th Grand Elder had reached the Universe Realm. The other Grand Elders were all at the perfected Galaxy Realm. The next step towards the Universe Realm was extremely challenging. Chen Qing himself wasn't yet 300 years old, but his cultivation had progressed at an astonishing rate. He had a breakthrough 6 months ago, advancing from the final stage in the Planet Realm into the first stage of the Eternal Star Realm. Such natural talent could even be deemed as a gift from the heavens. Wang Baoli looked at his overperforming senior brother, who had stolen all the limelight, and sighed secretly. He felt such immense stress. As his memories returned to him, he began to remember what freaks his senior brothers and senior sisters were. Each one of them was worse than the next. The strongest of them was already at the Galaxy Realm. The weakest of them was already at the Planet Realm. He was the only one still at the perfected Foundation Establishment Realm within the Spirit Immortal Realm. He hadn't yet even reached the Core Formation Realm. While Wang Baoli was lamenting inwardly, Chen Qing, who had been bursting with passionate, heartfelt emotion, seemed to have suddenly remembered something. He looked around, then lowered his head and grabbed hold of Wang Baoli's shoulder. He had a mysterious look on his face as he whispered, "Baoli, do you know whose soul I met when I drew the corpse face yesterday?" Wang Baoli eyed his senior brother, who was trying to act mysterious but had a perverted look on his face. He rolled his eyes. "Senior brother, I've regained a significant portion of my memories. You don't have to scare me. When the living perishes, unless there are massive deaths that might have been a result of the destruction of a planet, we of the dark sect are often not required to ferry those souls personally. The heavenly Tao would lead and guide them to the nearest rebirth abyss of the dark sect, and the souls will enter our corpse face mirrors. We will then paint the faces for their next lives. When we are painting the corpse faces, the will of the heavenly Tao will descend upon us and let us know what the soul will look like in their next life. We can paint their faces, but we won't be able to know this soul's past life or how they looked in that past life. That's why you won't be able to recognize anyone, no matter who appears in the mirror." Chen Qing stared. He looked around, then leaned closer to Wang Baoli and whispered, "Of course, I'm aware that we can't see the past life of the dead soul, but I can see its next life. Yesterday, I met a soul and saw her next life. She's going to be my Tao partner. She'll accompany me by my side. We will love each other for the rest of our lives, until the end of time. We'll even have 3 children. That's why I got excited. I unleashed 120% of my ability and painted her into a beauty. Both her figure and her face aligned perfectly with my aesthetics." At that, Chen Qing smiled happily. He had a look of anticipation on his face. "You mean you can do that?" Wang Baoli was stunned. He found that incredulous. Chapter 454, The Dark Art, Soul Guidance. Chapter 454, The Dark Art, Soul Guidance. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. As Chen Qing continued to bask in his self-satisfaction, and as Wang Baoli looked on with incredulity and envy, a soft cough sounded behind them. It echoed and made the self-satisfied Chen Qing shudder violently. He turned around hastily, the happiness on his face being replaced by a serious expression. His earlier perverted look transformed to one of righteousness as he lowered his voice and bowed. "Greetings, Master." It had to be said that Chen Qing was indeed very experienced. That was why he had been able to react so quickly. Wang Baoli was comparably more inexperienced and slower on the uptake. It took him a moment to turn around and see his master, Ming Kunzi, standing behind them. "Greetings, Master." Wang Baoli bowed hurriedly. He didn't think that he had been slow to react, but that his senior brother, Chen Qing, must have felt sheepish at his own behavior and thus reacted more quickly. Wang Baoli noticed that their master, Ming Kunzi, didn't seem to notice Chen Qing. He was instead gazing kindly at him. "Baoli, how's your corpse face coming along?" Wang Baoli hastily replied upon hearing what his master said. "Dear Master, your humble disciple has already familiarized himself with the corpse face art. I followed the will of the heavenly Tao exactly when I painted the corpse face for the dead souls. In addition, every time, sympathy and compassion would rise in my heart, so I draw a few more strokes for them." Wang Baoli was extremely pleased with his painting skills. When he said that, Chen Qing, who was standing beside him, blinked. He seemed to find his master's question slightly strange. Feeling slightly guilty, he decided to steer the conversation away. At present, his junior brother Baoli was the best way to change the topic. He spoke hastily, "Master, don't listen to junior brother Baoli speak rubbish. I was next to him and saw very clearly that junior brother Baoli has been mischievous. His corpse faces were indeed decent, but this guy. I don't know why, but he kept painting fatties. It didn't matter if they were men or women, they all turned out to be fatties. I can almost imagine the future, when this batch of souls is reborn, that the world would suddenly be filled with a whole lot of fatties." Chen Qing sighed. He lowered his head and winked at Wang Baoli. He wanted to tell his junior brother that he was sorry, but this senior brother had no other choice. He could only use his junior brother as a distraction. Wang Baoli glared. He wanted to explain himself, but then he saw what his senior brother was trying to hint at him. He held back his feelings of injustice and began to sulk. He didn't say a word. Ming Kunzi didn't seem to pay much mind to what Chen Qing said, nor did he pursue it further. Instead, he gave Wang Baoli a few tips on the finer details of painting corpse faces. Next to them, Chen Qing appeared obedient. He nodded from time to time, as if agreeing with what his master had just said, as if his master was simply too amazing. After a while, Ming Kunzi left. When he was leaving, Wang Baoli noticed his master's right hand. It appeared more blurry than before. It was like what had happened on the boat, when he had seen his master's finger. The sight shocked Wang Baoli. He was about to ask his master about it when the latter went away. What is the reason behind that? Wang Baoli hesitated before he communicated his doubts to his senior brother. When Chen Qing heard his question, there was surprise and shock on his face. You must have made a mistake, I don't see anything. Wang Baoli was caught in a slight daze. He thought hard about it and wondered if he had indeed made a mistake. The next day, when he went to visit his master again, he paid greater attention and observed that his master's hand appeared normal. He couldn't help but rub his eyes. He thought perhaps there really was something wrong with his eyes. The doubts in his heart didn't lessen though. He simply kept them to himself. Time passed steadily. Another 2 weeks passed. During this period, Wang Baoli continued to paint corpse faces every day. With the great number of paintings he did, his corpse face art reached great heights. In addition, with his senior brother helping him to regain his memories, he began to recall the second level of the dark art. The second level of the dark art was called Soul Guidance. The first level of the dark art is corpse face, and the second level is soul guidance. This is a divine power and a cultivation technique. The dark fire is like spirit qi. It will continue to accumulate inside the body. As Wang Baoli's memories continued to surface, he consolidated what he now knew about the dark art in a manner coherent to himself. He also knew that the dark corpse face art was akin to a cultivation technique that was taught to Foundation Establishment Realm disciples, in the dark sect. By mastering this technique, one might be able to achieve a breakthrough in the Foundation Establishment Realm and form the dark core, and, after which, begin to practice soul guidance. However, this way of training was no longer in fashion. To those who were gifted, the dark sect would have the disciple practice corpse face until they reached the perfected Foundation Establishment Realm. After which, they would begin to practice the second level of the dark art, soul guidance. This would spur the mutation of the dark fire inside their body, and the dark fire would grow in strength and number. When the disciple formed their core, it would be stronger for it. This was because the soul guidance technique accelerated the absorption of dark qi and compressed the dark fire inside one's body. This allowed multiple dark fires to appear. The number of dark fire appearances would differ according to each individual's natural talents. According to the dark sect's records, the highest number of times the dark fires multiplied was 81 times. This meant that 81 dark fires layered over one another and eventually formed a dark core. Its power was immense. The person who had achieved such a feat was the senior brother beside him, Chen Qing. Others had managed to reach a couple of dozen layers as well. As a means of attack, the soul guidance technique would summon a dark hand from inside one's body. This dark hand could pierce through the flesh of all living creatures and grab hold of its soul. This was soul guidance. Powerful beyond measure. If a dark core realm cultivator unleashed this technique, its power would be even greater. After regaining these memories, Wang Baoli's breathing quickened. Besides painting corpse faces every day, he began to practice the soul guidance technique. It was still a struggle for him to practice this divine power, but its effect of increasing one's dark fires was clear, especially where Wang Baoli was concerned. The dark fires inside his body grew from its original 3 to 4, then 5, then 6, then 7. At the end of the 2 weeks, he had 17 dark fires inside his body. When they were layered together, their combined power surpassed that of what he had in the past. Now, when he walked around in the dark sect, the mere aura that he exuded would strike fear and awe into the hearts of those souls outside the sect who had sinned greatly in their past lives, and had been punished and made into servants. When they saw him, they would quake in their boots and prostrate themselves before him. This was an awesome aura that Wang Baoli hadn't possessed when he had first returned to the dark sect. Wang Baoli had thought that the days that followed would be as peaceful as they were now, that they would pass quietly. However, after 7 days passed, suddenly, one day at noon, sudden winds swept into the dark sect. Lightning descended, and the heavens boomed with thunder. The skies darkened as an overpowering aura descended from the starry skies. The aura was simply too overpowering. There were 7 presences, and 6 of them had surpassed the power of a heavenly presence. When they descended, the entire sky quaked, and the planets beyond the dark sect shuddered. All living creatures felt a weight upon them. It was as if time itself had slowed down. They were secondary to the 7th presence. As soon as it appeared, all planets beyond the dark sect let loose a loud booming sound. It was as if they were about to collapse into themselves. One could even see lines of fractures appearing on each planet. The gates of rebirth on the planets began to sway, and their brightness dimmed. The rivers of souls passing through the gates trembled and froze, seemingly unable to move. Every dark sect disciple on the planets began breathing quickly and unevenly. Alarm and shock rose like waves in their minds. It was the same for the giant planet that the dark sect was on. Giant beasts trembled, countless souls shrieked, the earth shook, and the heavens thundered. In the skies above the dark sect appeared 7 suns. Amongst the 7 suns, 6 were crimson red. Only one was purple. As soon as they appeared, a voice filled with intense fury and violence howled from within the purple sun. Ming Kunzi, hand over my daughter's soul. As the howl thundered out, an intense purple light exploded from the purple sun. The same happened with the surrounding 6 red suns. Light blanketed the entire region in an instant. Violence and heat, carrying infinite destruction, seemed to be threatening the complete annihilation of the region. It appeared as if it was about to crush and turn everything into dust. As the overwhelming power erupted, within the dark sect, an equally overpowering aura erupted. Numerous moons rose to the skies. There were 13 bright moons, and each one of them exuded a power that rivaled the red suns. They pushed back the intense aura of the red suns, and it was then that the 14th moon rose into the sky. The color of this moon was black. Chapter 455, No Future. Chapter 455, No Future. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. You've gone too far. The instant the 14th moon rose into the sky, Ming Kunzi's voice thundered out from within, answering the voice within the purple sun. Ming Kunzi's voice was laced with ice. It was devoid of all emotions and seemed to contain the will of the heavenly Tao as it echoed in the heavens. As soon as the voice appeared, the region, which had been quaking and weighed down by the appearance of the 7 suns, seemed to recover from said appearance. It was as if everything had been erased in that instant. It was as if the heavenly Tao had descended suddenly and enveloped the dark sect. The heavenly Tao was turning the tables on the 7 suns that had intruded into the space and began a counterattack. The heavens thundered, and the 7 suns shook. The purple sun shone even brighter as a figure appeared within the sun. It was a middle-aged man wearing a purple-colored robe. Behind him was a gigantic illusory figure. It seemed to be fused with the sun and had 3 heads and 6 arms. Ming Kunzi, your dark sect dares ferry the souls of my children. For this, we, the never-ending clan, demand an answer. Every living thing is a part of the cycle of rebirth. The heavenly Tao itself is a cycle. One who has awakened has no need for dreams. There is only the next life, this principle cannot be changed. Ming Kunzi, who was wearing a black robe, stepped out from the 14th black moon as his words rang out. He stood in the sky as he spoke coolly. Cannot be changed? The middle-aged man stepped out from the purple sun. In his anger, he laughed. He raised his right hand. Instantly, a blinding light erupted from the 6 red suns surrounding him, and light flooded the entire area in an instant. From afar, it was like a red sea, which roared and surged towards Ming Kunzi. Ming Kunzi snorted. He waved his hand as well, and a black light spread out instantly. It was like the dark night, and it clashed with the incoming red light. The two began a battle in the sky, in a manner that Wang Baoli found incomprehensible. The heavens shook, and the entire region quavered. No one could be seen in the fight though. It was only red and black clashing back and forth in the sky, pushing against and devouring each other. Even the passing of time seemed to be affected. The time governing heaven and earth was no longer the same, and a breath on the earth was a day to the two entities in the sky. It was then, as Wang Baoli's breathing grew uneven, that a large hand appeared from inside the red light in the sky. It went through the sea of light and headed towards the palace where the dark sect was, making a sudden grab. "How dare you!" Ming Kunzi's roar boomed and resonated in the heavens. A lantern ore suddenly reached out from within the black light in the sky. It expanded without stopping, growing until it could hold the heavens up. Then, it slammed towards the giant hand. It was still too late. The other had come prepared. With a single grab, the giant hand pulled a soul out from within the dark sect's rebirth hall. It was the soul of a woman whose corpse face had been completed. She was beautiful, and her eyes were shut as if she were sleeping. If not for today's incident, she might have been led away under the laws of the heavenly Tao a few days later, to be reborn and begin her next life. She had been forcibly pulled out because of what was happening today. However, just as she was led out, Ming Kunzi's lantern ore had come slamming forward to stop the giant hand. The giant hand was unable to withstand the attack and disintegrated instantly. The shockwaves from their collision contained the immense power of destruction. An eternal star realm cultivator wouldn't have survived it, much less a mere soul. Before the eyes of everyone in the dark sect, the soul was destroyed by the shockwaves of this collision. In an instant, it was disintegrated and turned into dust. No one could tell if the never-ending clan had made the killing blow or if Ming Kunzi had been the one who had done it. Regardless, the soul had been torn apart. It had disappeared from this world and no longer existed. The hurricanes that erupted from the collision between the lantern ore and the giant hand hadn't only destroyed this soul, but they formed waves that swept through the entire dark sect. Despite the protection of array formations, a blow from such a powerful cultivator of the never-ending clan was still immensely powerful. All cultivators whose cultivation was below that of the planet realm were assaulted by a loud buzzing in their heads. Wang Baoli was only at the perfected foundation establishment realm. He only heard a loud buzzing explosion in his ears before his vision went black, and he passed out. After an unknown period of time, he finally woke up. The fight had already ended. The first thing he saw when he woke up was his master Ming Kunzi's back. After inspecting Wang Baoli and ensuring that there was nothing wrong with him, Ming Kunzi left. Before he left, he saw the hesitation and doubt in Wang Baoli's eyes. He gave Wang Baoli a deep, meaningful look. "Baoli, we of the dark sect serve the heavenly Tao. No matter who we were in the past, this is our mission now. You must remember this, we must not reverse the cycle of life and death." After saying that, Ming Kunzi turned around and slowly walked away. Wang Baoli was silent. He had mixed feelings regarding this. He couldn't tell if the never-ending clan was right or if the dark sect was right. After doing some research in the dark sect, he soon found out that the person who had barged into their sect that day was Tu Mu. He was one of the 9 great emperors of the never-ending clan. The Red Suns were the 6 divine kings under his charge. Their cultivation had exceeded the eternal star realm, and they were at the galaxy realm. They were the most powerful cultivators in the entire universe. As for the daughter, during the long eons, perhaps even Tu Mu himself wouldn't remember how many daughters he had. After Wang Baoli read through those documents, he fell silent. He didn't understand what was going on, but he knew that there was a possibility that the emperor of the never-ending clan hadn't come knocking at their door because of his daughter's soul. Wang Baoli wasn't sure of the exact reasons. He could not find any answers. But, having seen the truly powerful, he began to experience intense anxiety regarding his own cultivation. Compared to them, he felt he was too weak. He was as fragile as a twig in a storm. After waking up, Wang Baoli began to concentrate on his training. He could sense that his senior brother had also gone into seclusion as he hadn't seen the latter for a long time. Another month passed. Wang Baoli's dark fires grew to as many as 37. It was then when Ming Kunzi brought him to a great hall inside the dark sect one day. The great hall was filled with black mist. The great hall was surrounded by a thick mist, as was the inside of the hall. One could only see the center of the hall, where there was a big, colorless pool. Black mist rose from the pool, and bubbles kept forming and bursting inside it. This was the soul pond. There were many soul ponds in the dark sect, and this pond was only one of them. After dead souls were led to the dark sect, they would first gather here. They would then enter the corpse face mirror and have their corpse face painted by a disciple. After, they would either be sent to the path of rebirth or the rebirth hallucination array formation. Through the hallucination, they would have their characters reformed. Finally, they would await the heavenly Tao to lead them into the river of souls, where they would flow through the gate of rebirth. There were countless souls in the river of souls that tossed and turned in the pond. Some struggled to climb out with the rising bubbles, while more rose to the surface of the pond and revealed their faces. There were men and women, old and young. Some faces were peaceful, while others were furious. Some wept, while others laughed. They were of different colors as well. Some were the same color as the pond, while others were pitch black. Even the waters of the pond couldn't cleanse them within a short period of time. The colorless ones are the ordinary souls. The black ones mean that they carry an intense grudge within them. Baoli, unleash your soul guidance technique and draw 3 souls from the soul pond. Purify them and put them to use for your future dark artifacts, as your artifact spirits. Ming Kunzi spoke slowly as Wang Baoli stared at the soul pond. He had a deep, unfathomable look in his eyes as he stared at Wang Baoli. Artifact spirits? Wang Baoli could feel his memories blurring. A dark child requires 3 dark artifacts, a boat spirit, a black robe, and a lantern ore. These are items that every dark child should have. The artifact spirits within these dark artifacts should be chosen by yourself. Upon saying that, Ming Kunzi spoke no more. Wang Baoli thought for a while. He vaguely remembered that this was indeed the case, so he didn't think further. Instead, he turned and stared at what rested beneath the pool. After a moment, he took a deep breath and activated his dark fire, attempting to unleash the soul guidance technique. After failing 6 times, he finally succeeded on his 7th try, successfully unleashing the soul guidance technique. An illusory large hand suddenly reached out from within his body and dipped into the pool, grabbing hold of 3 souls. The first was a large, fearsome-looking man. The second was a sullen-faced elder. And the last was a young boy of 7 or 8. Chapter 456, The 3 Intractable Souls. Chapter 456, The 3 Intractable Souls. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli himself didn't know how he had managed to pull those 3 souls out. Perhaps some powers that be had led his soul-guiding hand to plunge itself into the pool and pull them out naturally. Every dark child's fate is entwined with the artifact spirits in their dark artifacts. It seems like the 3 souls in this soul pool are going to belong to you. Ming Kunzi smiled faintly as he watched Wang Baoli unleash the soul guidance technique and pull out 3 souls from the soul pool. But they are all black souls. It means that they've sinned gravely in their past lives. They cannot yet enter the cycle of rebirth. You have to purify them. Since your fate is linked with theirs, you have the responsibility to cleanse them of their sins and their grudges. You have to make them willing to follow you and become your artifact spirits. After hearing that, Wang Baoli looked at the 3 souls he had caught and their pitch-black forms. At present, they were caught in his illusory hand. They appeared to be nervous, but they were all displaying different behaviors. The young boy had a face dark with violence. It seemed that the more nervous he was, the angrier he got. He stared unblinkingly at Wang Baoli. It was as if he would swallow Wang Baoli whole as soon as the opportunity presented itself. Compared to the young boy, who had every emotion shown clearly, the elder next to him was different. He had looked sullen earlier. Now, however, he had calmed down. He cupped his fists towards Wang Baoli and lowered his head. It seemed as if he was submitting himself to Wang Baoli, but Wang Baoli could feel his true feelings while he was held within the illusory hand. The elder was obviously devious and cunning. He appeared submissive but was actually filled with malicious intent. The tall, fearsome-looking man seemed to be more simple-minded. Although he appeared fierce and frightening, after being caught and pulled out of the pool, he began to look around nervously. When he saw the soul pools surrounding him and the few female disciples guarding the pools, his eyes brightened immediately. There was a perverted look in his eyes. He almost drooled. Of course, as a soul, he had no saliva to speak of. His perverted and excited appearance made it clear that he was a pervert. This, Master, it's going to be a challenge purifying these souls. After examining the three souls, Wang Baoli's head began to throb. He wondered if he should discuss further with his master and if he could make a second attempt and get another new batch of souls. Ming Kunzi seemed to have guessed what Wang Baoli was thinking. He glared at Wang Baoli, ignored the latter, then turned and left. Before he left, he gave Wang Baoli a deadline to cleanse these souls. Stop having random thoughts. You have a month. You must complete the purification. Wang Baoli saw his master's sudden insistent stance and his head throbbed. Exasperated, after his master left, he brought the three souls back to his residence at the dark sect. He released the three souls in his residence. As soon as they appeared, they immediately checked out the residence. Wang Baoli didn't pay them much mind and said, "Let's talk this through. You've sinned gravely in your past lives and lost the right to be reborn. Your only option is to become my artifact spirits. That's why." Just as Wang Baoli said that, before he was even done with everything he wanted to say, the boy's eyes flashed. He retreated hastily and instantly. It seemed like he wanted to escape this place. There was an array formation placed in Wang Baoli's residence, however. With a thunderous boom, the boy's head slammed into the array formation. He cried out in pain and retreated immediately. Violence flashed in his eyes, and he howled and lunged at Wang Baoli. It seemed like he wanted to swallow Wang Baoli whole. Before he could draw near, he was burned by the dark fire that had leaped out from Wang Baoli's body. He screamed again. He finally stopped his malicious acts and instead began to shudder. When he stared at Wang Baoli, though, his eyes remained bright with violence and madness. He seemed untamable. Wang Baoli began to feel unhappy. He glared at the young boy, then turned his eyes towards the other two souls. The pervert seemed scornful towards the young man, and his attitude towards Wang Baoli was the same. He yawned. He did not try to flee, but the look on his face seemed to say it all. "You want to let me become your artifact spirit? Impossible." Similarly, the elder didn't attempt to escape. Compared to the other two souls, his expression remained the same, revealing neither joy nor anger. His head was lowered like an elderly servant. "I won't mince words with you. If you don't agree to become my artifact spirits, your souls will be destroyed and turned to dust." Wang Baoli was beginning to grow annoyed. He felt that trying to cleanse these three souls was just a waste of his time. He couldn't see the sins that they had committed in their past lives, but from the color of their souls and their current attitudes, he could somewhat guess the kind of raping and pillaging, as well as the murder and savagery, they had committed. "You want to make me your artifact spirit? Impossible. My dream is to never grow old and for my parents to take care of me and be by my side forever. I've already gotten that and enjoyed it for quite a while, so I don't care if you kill me. So what if I die? It's not as if I haven't done that before." The young boy sneered, his voice shrill. Wang Baoli was shocked by the boy's words because the young boy looked to be about 7 or 8 years old. He thought about what the latter had just revealed as his ambition and didn't say anything. The pervert next to him kept yawning, giving Wang Baoli a sideways glance. He eyed Wang Baoli's thighs and his chest and immediately looked bored. "If you'd been a woman and had been willing to play with me, I might have agreed after enjoying myself. You just do whatever you like. Kill me. I'm not afraid. Even if my soul turns to dust, millions of like-minded comrades will receive my will. They will conquer all the opposite sex in the world. That is my ambition," the pervert proclaimed proudly, standing taller as he spoke. Such grand ambitions made the expression on Wang Baoli's face turn even odder. He nodded his head, then turned towards the old fox that gave the appearance of an old servant. The old pervert smiled and cupped his fists towards Wang Baoli in greeting. "Esteemed dark child, I cannot agree to this matter. I won't hide the truth from you. I was the state preceptor of the Kuling kingdom in my past life. I reported to one man while tens of thousands of men reported to me. My only regret is that I was only able to serve my office for 300 years. I haven't had enough, so how could I become your artifact spirit?" Wang Baoli nodded again as he stared at the three souls filled with pride and arrogance. Then, he laughed suddenly, pointing at the small boy. "You want to never grow up and for your parents to take care of you and be by your side forever, right? You're a good kid, so I'll help you. With that, Wang Baoli lifted his right hand and grabbed hold of the boy. With a series of hand seals, he threw him into the array formation inside his residence. The array formation started transforming. It was like a hurricane, and it swallowed the young boy's soul instantly. Wang Baoli made a series of hand seals and adjusted the array formation. Then, he looked at the pervert. You want to conquer the opposite sex of the entire world, right? That's easy. I'll fulfill your wish. As soon as Wang Baoli said that, he didn't give the pervert any time to react. He waved his big hand and pulled the pervert into the hurricane. He adjusted the array formation once again before he turned and looked at the elder. The elder had been reeling back with alarm. He didn't know what was going to happen to the other two souls, but he sensed that his fate after being thrown in the array formation was going to be worse than death. He was about to speak, but it was too late. Wang Baoli's large hand had grabbed hold of him and flung the old fox into the array formation. He thought he heard Wang Baoli snorting just as he entered the array formation. Weren't you regretting the fact that you were only state preceptor for 300 years? No problem, I'll help answer your prayers, I'll make sure you have no regrets. After saying that, Wang Baoli adjusted the array formation once again. The array formation that he had thrown the three souls into was the rebirth hallucination array formation of the dark sect. The array formation was used to reform a dead soul's character, to ensure a clean break between his past life and his next life. It was also used by disciples to gain enlightenment. They could enter it for training. After all, the rebirth hallucination array formation was linked to the will of the heavenly Tao. It could conjure the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. At the same time, with sufficient access rights, it could also create specific illusory worlds. Both people and souls thrown into this world wouldn't be able to discern truth from illusion. The person controlling the illusion could also control the passing of time in this world. For the old fox who had been a state preceptor in his past life, he created a universe filled with war. He would once again take up the office of state preceptor in this world. For the great pervert, the task was simpler. Wang Baoli adjusted the array formation and created a world where he was the only man in a matriarchal society. As for the young boy, the task was equally simple. Wang Baoli answered all his wishes and created a perfect world according to his dreams. The key point was in the passing of time in these worlds. He had synchronized the world such that, a day in the outside world would be equivalent to 10,000 years in the illusory worlds. Having done the above, Wang Baoli began to practice his soul guidance technique. 3 days later, the three souls were shelved to the back of his mind. 2 weeks passed. Chapter 457, Master, you finally arrived. Chapter 457, Master, you finally arrived. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli had grown more familiar during the 2 weeks training with soul guidance, the second level of the dark art. However, his success rate remained dismal. He didn't even want to think about using it as a form of attack successfully. Wang Baoli knew that this was all because of his cultivation. After all, this was a technique meant for one at the core formation realm. What he needed to do wasn't to wield the soul guidance technique but to use it as an aid to strengthen and grow his dark fires. He needed to use it to multiply his dark fires and prepare for his core formation. At present, he had increased the number of his dark fires to 63 dark fires. Every eruption of his cultivation was an incredible display of power. It was many times greater than what he had been capable of in the past. The dark sect had a minimum requirement for gifted disciples at the verge of core formation. They needed to have at least 36 dark fires. Wang Baoli had surpassed the minimum requirement vastly. However, he felt that he still had room to grow. During his training, Wang Baoli completely forgot about the three souls he had thrown into the rebirth hallucination array formation. The deadline his master had given him to purify the vengeful souls slowly approached. Another 7 days passed. Wang Baoli, who finally managed to reach 70 dark fires, suddenly remembered the assignment his master had given him. I think I've forgotten something. Wang Baoli blinked. He stared at the array formation sheepishly. I recall I adjusted the passing of time such that 10,000 years would pass in the illusory world for every day in the outside world. Wang Baoli coughed awkwardly. He decided that the three souls had carried their dreams and ambitions into the illusory worlds. Even though he had almost forgotten about their existence, but, now that he thought about it, this wasn't really a mistake on his part. His mind was put to ease at that thought. He stood before the rebirth hallucination array formation, raised his right hand and performed a series of hand seals, then pressed his hand on the array formation. His vision was a sudden blur. It seemed as if his soul had stepped out from his physical form and gone wandering. He entered the array formation to retrieve the three souls. The first mirage he entered was the young boys. It was a world without cultivators. To a certain extent, this society resembled the Federation in Wang Baoli's dream. It was like the Federation 1,000 years ago. Peace reigned over the entire world. The city that the boy resided in was a big capital city in this world. In the day, people bustled about, while in the night, neon lights lit the skies up. It was a prosperous place filled with wealth and luxury. Wang Baoli arrived during the early morning of this world, while the sun was shining brightly and vehicles streamed down the roads. Wang Baoli appeared in a school district in the city. My senses tell me that the kid should be here. Wang Baoli floated in mid-air as he rubbed at his chin. He began to search. It didn't take him long to find a 7 to 8-year-old young boy in an alley. He was in uniform and carrying a huge, and what seemed to be extremely weighty, school bag. He trudged along wearily, looking like he was about to cry. Behind him followed a middle-aged couple. They were clearly the boy's parents. They carried even heavier school bags and kept up a constant litany of reminders as they walked. It was a heartwarming sight. Wang Baoli was comforted by the scene. Even though he might have been late, the sight of the family basking in love and tenderness reminded him of his own parents. Wang Baoli suddenly froze at that thought. He realized that he had a blurry image of his parents in this real life, but that he could clearly remember his family in his dream of the Federation. Wang Baoli began to feel lost and confused. He instinctively looked at the world around him. It was extremely realistic. Whether it was the stirring of the gentle breeze or the distant bustling of the city crowd, nothing gave off a hint of them being a mere illusion to his senses. As Wang Baoli continued to feel shocked and intrigued, the voices of the boy's family drifted into Wang Baoli's ears as they approached. Xiao Bao, you must be diligent in your studies. Stop thinking about playing video games and spending money. When you grow up, you won't have us nagging you anymore. Stop scolding the child. Xiao Bao, your father is doing this for your own good. You're still a child. It's your birthday today though, which is why I've discussed it with your father, and after school ends today, you can relax for a bit. We'll only run through 8 lessons today, and complete 20 practice papers, then, memorize 50 classical poems. After that, you'll get to have cake. Xiao Bao, you're still so young. Stop sighing all the time. You must treasure your time in school. After all, there are only 30,000 years to your graduation from elementary school. I've discussed it with your father. For the next 200,000 years in junior high, we'll find you an even better after-school class. There was confusion in the young boy's eyes. He almost wept when he heard what his parents said, but he had long since cried all his tears. The eye bags under his eyes were charcoal black. He seemed to be on the verge of a mental breakdown. He didn't know how he had managed to survive the past 200,000 years. Every day he had to go to school, attend tutoring after school, do practice papers, memorize all sorts of information. The days repeated themselves. The years repeated themselves. Under the care and company of his parents, he kept on studying, and studying, and studying. He had thought about resisting and fighting back, but it didn't matter what methods he resorted to. Even when he had tried to kill himself, he would wake up the next morning as if nothing had happened. He would carry on studying and going for tutoring. The only thing that was keeping him sane was the thought that everything was false. He knew that Wang Baoli was going to come for him one day, so he kept on waiting. He waited for 200,000 years, but Wang Baoli didn't come. Wang Baoli had a strange look on his face when he heard the conversation between the boy's parents. Shock stirred inside him when he saw how miserable the boy looked, and he felt some pity for him. He coughed. When the cough rang out in the air, the entire world froze instantly. Everything fell still. Only he and the boy remained untouched by the spell. The boy hadn't noticed anything amiss at first. He had continued to lug his school bag and drag his feet forward, loss and misery clear on his face. After a few steps, he finally noticed something was wrong. He lifted his head abruptly and stared around him. When he saw Wang Baoli, he was immediately overcome with excitement. He burst out into tears and leaped towards Wang Baoli. With a thud, he fell to his knees. "Master, you've finally arrived. I was wrong. Please take me away. I don't want to stay here. I don't want to go for tutoring anymore. I want to return and be an artifact spirit. Please, Master, take me away, please." The young boy sobbed terribly. He seemed afraid that Wang Baoli would ignore him, so he hugged Wang Baoli's thigh tightly. His weeping grew louder. Wang Baoli could only put a look of exasperation on his face. He led the boy out of the rebirth hallucination array formation. After some thought, he headed into the world which contained the sly fox who had called himself a state preceptor. The vastness of this world exceeded that of the young boy. The stars stretched on endlessly into the horizon, and it resembled the real world to a certain extent. There were cultivators here, even extremely powerful cultivators. However, regardless of how powerful they were, no one noticed when Wang Baoli entered this world. With a single thought, Wang Baoli could destroy this entire world. He entered the world and found the old fox that had been a state preceptor in his past life. He was running for his life. He was fleeing madly. He appeared to be in a wretched state, and his hair was in disarray. Regardless, he fled at an astonishing speed. He seemed to be running for his dear life without care for anything else in the world. Behind him were countless people in pursuit. Amongst them were countless cultivators and a great number of cruisers clustered together and crowding the sky. They chased after him relentlessly. It was clear that both the cultivators and the cruisers didn't belong to the same faction. On closer examination, it seemed that they belonged to at least a dozen different camps. Wang Baoli might not have been so surprised if they had only been chasing after the sly fox. However, this was a different sort of pursuit. The expression on Wang Baoli's face grew odd. The pursuers were running and shouting at the same time. There was hostility amongst the different factions, and they seemed to be fighting amongst one another. "State Preceptor, you are no longer young. You shouldn't be running so quickly. Be careful not to injure yourself. State Preceptor, don't go. Our country cannot live without you. Its tens of millions of citizens cannot live without you. State Preceptor, the Emperor has decreed. If you do not return, he'll kill himself. State Preceptor, we've discovered another galaxy. There are thousands of civilizations there, waiting for you to become their State Preceptor." The cheers of those in pursuit echoed and rang out in the air. The old man fleeing in front was about to go mad. His unbound hair flew in his face, and his eyes were red as he howled in fury and sorrow. "Scram, all of you! I'm not the State Preceptor. You're the State Preceptor. Your whole family are State Preceptors." As he said that, his tears began to flow once more. A deep sorrow filled his heart. Chapter 458, The Great Emperor's Many Empresses. Chapter 458, The Great Emperor's Many Empresses. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. He recalled his experiences for the past 200 millennia. Everything had started out fine. As a state preceptor of a small kingdom, he had enjoyed an elevated status. He had grown ambitious and had soon discovered a more powerful kingdom that needed a state preceptor. The kingdom had extended a sincere invitation, which he had accepted. Years later, another even more powerful kingdom had required a state preceptor and invited him to join them. At that time, his ambitions remained grand, so he had gone to them. Every time he had become the state preceptor of a new kingdom, he would find another even more powerful kingdom in need of a state preceptor soon after. The cycle repeated itself. He had been doing the same thing for the past 200 millennia. He couldn't even remember how many kingdoms he had been state preceptor of. He had grown tired of this office. He had done it so many times that he had been about to throw up. There had been no end in sight. He would continue to discover more kingdoms that needed a state preceptor. Finally, he had gone completely mad. He could no longer take it anymore. Even hearing the words "state preceptor" would drive him to the verge of a breakdown. That was why he had started to run away. But he had never managed to escape successfully. They had always managed to catch him and bring him back, where he would continue his office of state preceptor. He had thought of every means and ways. He had even resorted to destroying an entire kingdom. Regardless, there would still be new kingdoms waiting to capture him and invite him to become their state preceptor. He had been weeping tears of blood by then. The old fox let loose a heart-wrenching howl. What he desired the most now was to have a peaceful life. He no longer desired the position of state preceptor. As long as he could have an ordinary life, he was even willing to become an artifact spirit. That was why when he saw Wang Baoli as he was fleeing, he burst into tears. He fell to his knees immediately and prostrated before Wang Baoli. He began howling. "Master, you've finally arrived. Please take me away. I agree to become an artifact spirit. I no longer wish to be a state preceptor. Why was I such a fool, thinking about staying a state preceptor?" Wang Baoli led the weeping old fox away. He couldn't help but lament. He felt as if he had just gained a deeper understanding of human nature. They should thank me. I am the one who made them realize what it is that they truly need. Becoming my artifact spirit, that is what they desire the most. Wang Baoli patted his tummy with great satisfaction. He suddenly found the gesture extremely soothing and did it a few more times. Seems like I'm still missing something. Wang Baoli thought hard about it. After thinking for some time, he finally realized what it was he was missing. What a pity, the dream's still better, there were snacks. Wang Baoli shook his head with great regret. Then, he soon developed a great interest in the world that the extremely perverted man was in. I remember putting him in a matriarchal world where he is the only man. Wang Baoli's eyes shone brightly. With a series of hand seals, he entered the world of the pervert. This world began as a rather primitive one. However, after 200,000 years of development, it grew into a world with multiple empires. The empires had constant skirmishes and clashes with one another. Everyone, from the empress to the foot soldiers, were women. There were no men. Their reproduction systems were unique, and they were able to give birth to the next generation of women after carrying out a certain kind of ritual. Rightfully speaking, if a pervert was thrown into such a world, he should be basking in female company and enjoying a blissful, happy life. In reality, it was quite an exaggeration to say that he was basking in female company, and barely truthful to say that he was enjoying a life of utter bliss and happiness. When Wang Baoli arrived in this world and found the pervert, he noticed that they were holding a grand funeral. Countless women in armor guarded the area. Every single one of them was extremely beautiful and had well-formed, voluptuous figures. The mere sight of them would incite a primitive urge in the opposite sex. They surrounded a raised platform that served as an altar. Above the altar lay someone. He was extremely thin, almost skeletal, and there were many tubes injected into his skin, all over his body. Great volumes of fluids serving as nutrients were being pumped into this person's body. This person was the great pervert that Wang Baoli had thrown into this world 200,000 years ago. There was bewilderment in his eyes, and his entire body shuddered as the fluids continued to flow into his body. They kept him alive, no matter how much he wanted himself dead. Beside him were a dozen women dressed in clothes befitting a female empress. They surrounded him, and every single one of them was staring at the pervert with lust in their eyes. They stared at one another with enmity and hostility in their eyes. Wang Baoli was stunned at the sight. Before he could ponder further on the matter, the empresses began to speak. "Esteemed Emperor, the funeral has ended, so let us get down to serious business." "That's right, Great Emperor. Our empire has more than 30 million female subjects awaiting the Great Emperor's service. They wait for you to grant them bliss. We implore you to make a visit." "That won't do, he'll have to come to us first. I have more than 50 million subjects in my kingdom, and they have been waiting for the Emperor for a very long time. I fear disaster if he doesn't pay us a visit soon. All of your requests can be delayed. I have 200 million subjects that were about to revolt when I left. If I don't bring the Emperor back with me, they'll come charging here." The empresses continued their endless dispute until one of them frowned and said coolly, "Let's not fight. We have to seek the great emperor's views. As a last resort, we can place him on the altar, and our subjects may make a visit themselves. We can even earn considerable fees this way, but we'll have to arrange for guards to ensure that the emperor is unharmed." As soon as she said that, the pervert lying on the altar, who had no love for this living world, suddenly widened his eyes. Tears began to flow from his eyes as he struggled to speak in his weakened state. "Please, I beg you all, let me go. I really can't do it anymore." The high-spirited and ambitious pervert had reached the end of his rope. He broke down and wept loudly. However, no matter how much he cried, the empresses seemed to have reached a consensus. They had decided to leave him on the altar. It was then that the man, at the depths of his despair, saw Wang Baoli hovering in mid-air. He started to howl excitedly when he saw Wang Baoli. "Master, save me. Please, save me. As long as I get to leave this place, I'll do anything you want. I'll become an artifact spirit." Wang Baoli looked at the man with great sympathy. With a wave of his hand, the illusion vanished. When he reappeared, he was back in his residence. In front of him were the three souls, and they fell to their knees before him. The vengeful aura surrounding them had faded away considerably. They hadn't yet been completely cleansed, but they no longer resisted the idea of becoming an artifact spirit. They even seemed to look forward to it. Wang Baoli was greatly consoled when he saw that. He felt that he was still quite charismatic, considering the three souls willingly decided to devote their loyalty to him. Then, he stared at the young boy and the sly state preceptor again. Doubt flickered in his eyes. When he had first seen the two, he had felt they were familiar, but he hadn't been able to recall why. Now that he was looking at them again, the sense of familiarity intensified. "I should have met them before." Wang Baoli rubbed at his forehead. He thought for a very long while but couldn't come up with anything. He decided to set this matter aside. He reported to his master with the results of his attempts to make the three souls submit to him. Ming Kunzi didn't ask about the details of how Wang Baoli had managed to purify and cleanse the three souls within the time limit given. He led the three souls away so that he might craft dark artifacts for Wang Baoli and infuse the artifacts with artifact spirits. At the same time, he gave Wang Baoli another assignment. Go to the 10,000 Art Pavilion of the Dark Sect. Read everything about the Dark Sect and the dark mystic arts and techniques. Even if you cannot learn them all, you should still know and understand these mystic arts and techniques. When you are able to gain certain enlightenment, you can then try to break through the Foundation Establishment realm and enter the Dark Core realm. Wang Baoli followed his master's instructions obediently. He realized that there was still something amiss as he began to regain his memories, but he didn't have his entire memory back. He needed to read up on the various information on the Dark Sect, and their sect's divine powers and information so that he might try to regain more control over his memory. In the following month, Wang Baoli spent almost all his time in the 10,000 Art Pavilion. He browsed through collections of books and scrolls on mystic arts and techniques. His knowledge of the Dark Sect and the Dark Art grew considerably. The Spirit Immortal Realm is divided into 5 minor realms: the Foundation Establishment Realm, the Core Formation Realm, the Nascent Soul Realm, the Soul Conduit Realm, and the Spirit Immortal Realm. The corresponding levels of dark arts are the Corpse Face, the Soul Guidance, the Soul Fracture, the Burial Procession, and the Abyss Return. Wang Baoli's eyes shone with a bright light. He learned from the documents that the various levels from the Corpse Face to the Abyss Return formed the first tier of the Dark Art. The Dark Art had 7 tiers. In addition, Wang Baoli also found an extremely unique divine power after reading through the various materials. It was similar to the Rebirth Hallucination Array formation and yet different. Its name was the Dark Dream. Chapter 459, The Dark Core. Chapter 459, The Dark Core. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. The Dark Dream was extraordinary and bizarre. It was mystic art that pulled one into the dreamscape. It was formed from a Tao source that was in turn formed by exhausting one's own vitality. Only someone who had reached the Eternal Star Realm could perform it. This mystic art could be used against one's enemy. However, it was often used by the great and powerful to pass down knowledge and mystic arts and techniques to their descendants and heirs. Time in the dreamscape passed differently than in the real world. It could be manipulated. Knowledge about a mystic art could be seared directly into one's soul. It could be fused directly with one's spirit. The challenges that one met during training could be circumvented. This mystic art didn't allow the transmission of one's cultivation to another, which would enable them to become instantly powerful. However, most cultivators, having reached a certain stage in their cultivation, required enlightenment towards the Tao source and the principles of Tao rather than greater cultivation. This dark dream mystic art could achieve this flawlessly. It could also bring about other effects. For example, the effects of all serious injuries would be dampened in the dreamscape. There would be sufficient time for one to recover. However, such an extraordinary mystic art required a great deal of energy to be expended by the person performing it. Few would use this mystic art unless it was their last resort. It was considered a pseudo-forbidden art in the dark sect. Deliberation colored Wang Baoli's eyes after he read the details of this dark dream mystic art. After a long while, he shut his eyes. When he opened them again, he gazed around silently. 15 minutes passed. Wang Baoli took a deep breath and continued to keep his eyes shut in this 10,000 art pavilion. He began his training of the soul guidance technique. Despite not having reached the core formation realm and facing difficulty in mastering soul guidance, with his constant practice, he was able to make use of the soul guidance to strengthen and grow his dark qi. The dark fires in Wang Baoli's body gradually multiplied. Time passed steadily as he continued to train. 3 months went by in a blink of an eye. During this period, Wang Baoli focused entirely on multiplying his dark fires. They reached as many as 78. He was only a few steps away from the highest record of 81 dark fires. He should have met with some challenges along the way. However, said challenges never occurred to Wang Baoli. It was as if he was naturally suited to learning the dark art. This made Wang Baoli ponder more deeply. Suspicions began to surface in his mind, and they clouded his thoughts. After a long while, he finally suppressed these thoughts. He was about to continue his training when the jade slip in his storage bracelet vibrated. Wang Baoli pulled it out and released a long sigh. The sigh was colored with complicated emotions, regret, and confusion. Junior brother, I'm leaving the sect for some time to train. There are some things that I have to think about, take care. I'll return when I've thought things through. The voice transmission jade only had that single message. The person who had said that was his senior brother, Chen Qing. Wang Baoli had spent most of his time in meditation during his 3 months of seclusion. However, he still kept himself updated on some things that were going on in the sect. For example, what had happened to his senior brother, Chen Qing. This extremely talented and gifted senior brother had secretly told him something that day with great happiness and anticipation. He shared that his Tao partner in his next life was going to be the daughter of the never-ending clan's emperor. Chen Qing hadn't known the identity and family background of the soul he had painted a corpse face for prior to the arrival of the never-ending clan's emperor. He had only known that this soul was going to be his Tao partner after she was reborn. This was what the heavenly Tao had willed. This was what the fates had dictated. He had been extremely happy. When he had painted the corpse face, he had secretly made her more beautiful and more pleasing to his eye. He had been filled with anticipation. However, the shocking harsh reality had come crashing down on him too soon. With the arrival of the emperor of the never-ending clan and with the unfolding of the incredible and terrifying battle, he had seen with his own eyes, his wife of the next life being pulled out and turned into dust. He had fallen into a dead silence. Even though his destiny was to be entwined with this soul in their next life, and even though they hadn't truly made contact and come to know each other, everything had come to an end then, before anything had started. He remained lost. He didn't truly ache for the woman's soul, but his faith in his own Tao had been shaken. He didn't know who was wrong, whether it was the emperor of the never-ending clan or the dark sect, but he knew one thing: the soul did nothing wrong. Was the dark sect in the wrong? The dark sect simply served the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao was the culminated form of the laws of the universe. It was the origin of Tao for all dark sect cultivators. In his lost state and in his need for answers, he decided to leave for a while. He decided he needed to think this through carefully. He needed to find an answer. After becoming a silent and solitary shade of his past self, he then decided to leave. Wang Baoli had mixed feelings regarding this matter as well, but he was powerless to solve it or his doubts. He had thought about what he would do if this had happened to him instead. Wang Baoli set the question aside. As he continued to muse quietly on the matter, his training went ahead without pause. Another month passed, and the dark fires inside his body multiplied to 81 dark fires. When his dark fires reached as many as 81, his entire body shuddered. He could feel the 81 dark fires layering atop one another, burning brightly inside his body. With each intense eruption, they began to shrink and compress themselves. They compressed further and further, gradually forming a core. During the entire process, waves of spirit energy that surpassed the Foundation establishment realm erupted from this ever-compressing core made of dark fire. It felt as if millions of rivers were surging through the meridians throughout Wang Baoli's entire body. They flooded all major and minor meridians in a blink of an eye. Power permeated his entire body and surged outward into the physical world. At that moment, as Wang Baoli sat cross-legged, invisible hurricanes seemed to appear around him. They roared and spiraled around him. The power was insignificant to the truly powerful. After all, this was only a breakthrough from the Foundation establishment realm to the core formation realm. However, this was Wang Baoli's first time experiencing this. His entire body shuddered, and he felt his cultivation erupting and increasing without pause. Thunderous booms erupted inside his body. The hurricanes around him turned into an ocean of fire as icy flames spread outward. There was no end to its increasing power, and it continued to rise. The meridians inside his body shuddered, his flesh and blood shook, his cultivation churned, and the dark fires inside his body compressed further and further inward. Under the compression, his core became more and more distinct. It was going to take physical form any time now. It was then that Ming Kunzi appeared soundlessly before Wang Baoli inside the 10,000 art pavilion. His eyes were soft as he gazed at Wang Baoli with kindness. His form wasn't clear, appearing to be slightly indistinct. It looked like his finger and his hand that Wang Baoli had seen previously. At present, the gradual disintegration had spread to Ming Kunzi's entire body. Even so, he still lifted his hand and pointed at Wang Baoli's forehead. As soon as the finger landed, Wang Baoli shuddered violently. Thunder-like crashes rumbled inside his body. The formation of his core inside his body sped up suddenly, and within a blink of an eye, it transformed and became a dark core. As soon as the dark core was formed, a power that belonged to the core formation realm erupted from Wang Baoli's body and filled the air. Wang Baoli opened his eyes. His breathing was quick and uneven, and there was a lost look in his eyes. Memories of the Federation, what he had thought was merely a dream, surfaced in his mind again. They grew increasingly distinct. He remembered in his dream that he had been pursued by 3 extraterrestrial cultivators. He had entered the dark artifact and entered a cave in the underground city. He had sat on a lone black boat. He remembered before he had fallen into a deep sleep that an old, familiar voice had sounded beside his ear. It had said 2 words. Dark dream. Wang Baoli was silent. After a long moment, he lifted his head and stared at his master Ming Kunzi, who had appeared before him. Master! Wang Baoli murmured to himself. Before he could finish speaking, he noticed his master's form fading away. It faded away more quickly as he spoke. Wang Baoli shuddered. He had only been dazed at the sight. Now, however, an answer was gradually forming inside his heart. Perhaps, everything happening around him now was also a dream. It was an indescribable feeling. It felt as if he was hovering between sleep and wakefulness. It was as if he knew that he was dreaming. The dark dream mystic art surfaced in his mind then. After running through his sizes could be modified with a single thought. If the 3 dark artifacts are recovered to their perfect states, how powerful would they be? Shock stirred within Wang Baoli. He already knew the answer. Based on his understanding of the dark artifacts in his dark dream, he knew that if the dark artifacts could be repaired completely, they would become immense weapons that would help a dark child wander the universe. At that thought, Wang Baoli was overcome by excitement. After a moment, he took a deep breath and suddenly said, "Artifact spirits, report the extent of damage your respective dark artifacts have suffered." As soon as Wang Baoli spoke, the voices of his artifact spirits rang in his head. They spoke with extreme respect and deference. "Master, the lantern ore has lost 60% of its full form. The exact locations of these lost parts are unknown and beyond our senses. The remaining 40% of its parts have received approximately 80% damage. Only the power of laws is holding it together and preventing it from being completely ruined. Master, the dark robe is in a similar state. 70% of its full form has been lost. The remaining 3% of its parts are also mostly damaged." The boys and the state preceptor's answers gave Wang Baoli a headache. The 3 dark artifacts had simply received too much damage, especially the robes. Wang Baoli felt it no longer resembled robes and looked like strips of cloth instead. "That's useless. I got excited for nothing." Wang Baoli sighed. "Master, if there are sufficient materials, the dark artifact can repair itself. As long as any one of the dark artifacts is restored to 10% functionality, it will be able to establish a constant protective barrier that can withstand attacks from anyone below the spirit immortal realm." The words of the dark artifact's artifact spirit gave Wang Baoli hope. He was once again shocked by the power of the dark artifact. "You can achieve that with only 10% functionality? What if it's higher? If the dark sampan could be restored to 30% of its functionality, it will be able to unleash an attack that rivals one at the greater spirit immortal realm. But this will use up a lot of energy. More materials will be required for further repair before it can unleash a second attack. Considering that both the lantern ore and the dark robe are missing parts of their form, I suggest starting the repair of the dark sampan first." As the artifact spirit of the dark sampan spoke, he handed over a list of materials to Wang Baoli. The boy and the state preceptor would have refuted the artifact spirit of the dark sampan if it had been in the past, but they had nothing but exasperation and resignation in their hearts now. They could only follow their orders obediently. After all, starting with the repairs of the dark sampan was indeed the best option currently. Wang Baoli's eyes brightened. However, he couldn't help but smack his forehead after reading through the list of materials required. The materials required to repair the dark sampan were simply too much. Many of them were extremely rare materials, and some of the materials were actually stellar sources. All the materials that Wang Baoli had ever used in his refining dharmic artifacts couldn't compare to the value of 1/10,000th of the materials on this list. He couldn't help himself from sighing. "I bet I can craft a few divine armaments with these materials." "Master, you could indeed do that. However, they would lack the power of laws. As a result, they would only be inferior-grade divine armaments," the state preceptor said hastily, speaking before the boat spirit could say anything to try and prove his worth. Wang Baoli's eyes flashed. He had read quite extensively while in the dark dream, but he hadn't come across any information on divine armaments. He couldn't help but question further. "Inferior-grade divine armaments?" "Yes, Master. Divine armaments are divided into inferior grade, medial grade, superior grade, and perfect grade armaments. The difference between each grade is immense. It's like heaven and earth." The boy realized that if they began by repairing the dark sampan first, his worth would fall. That was why he had spoken hastily. "Have you seen the Federation's divine armament? What grade is it?" Wang Baoli asked immediately. "No, but we've sensed it before. It's an inferior grade divine armament." "Inferior grade? How about the dark artifact?" Wang Baoli's breathing grew uneven. All 3 dark artifacts are medial grade artifacts. In their complete form, they are able to unleash the power of a superior grade divine armament. When Wang Baoli heard that, he got so excited that he trembled. His eyes burned with a bright light, and fire burned his insides. It was as if he'd just picked up an invaluable and priceless treasure that had been lying on the side of the road. He thought the Federation's divine armament an extremely powerful artifact, so powerful that it was beyond description. However, it was only an inferior grade armament. His dark artifact, on the other hand, would become a superior grade armament once repaired completely. He wished he could immediately gather all the materials required and restore his dark artifact fully. His eyes reddened. He was like a starving gal that had been hungry for 1,000 years. His eyes glowed with a red light as he glanced around him suddenly. Resources. I need vast amounts of resources, Wang Baoli muttered. At that moment, 3 figures appeared in his mind suddenly, the 3 nascent soul realm extraterrestrial cultivators. They must have loads of resources on them. At that thought, Wang Baoli licked his lips and violence shone in his eyes. Based on his connection with the dark artifact, he knew that because the dark artifact couldn't shrink in size, he would face great difficulty in wielding it in the outside world. He wouldn't be able to unleash its full power. However, inside the dark artifact, within this 3-level world that had been conjured by the dark artifact, he was like a god. Even though he wouldn't be able to hold his own against extremely powerful entities, by gathering the power of the artifact spirits, it wasn't impossible for him to fight back against 3 nascent souls. Let's go. We're going to get the resources to fix the dark sampan. Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes. As he spoke, he pointed the illusory lantern ore in his hand forward. The heavens and earth thundered, and the entire 3-level underground world quaked. Simultaneously, light erupted from countless regions. The illusory black robe on Wang Baoli fluttered in the wind as the dark sampan beneath his feet started moving. Soundlessly, they raced into the skies, melting into the abyss instantly and vanishing without a trace. Chapter 464, The God of Death. Chapter 464, The God of Death. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. A year in the dark dream was a mere day in the real world. To the 3 extraterrestrial cultivators trapped in the 3-level underground world created by the dark artifact, only a day had passed since they lost sight of Wang Baoli. Fury burned inside them. They wanted to kill Wang Baoli so badly. But they did not panic. With their knowledge and experience, they could tell that the underground world created by the dark artifact was a closed universe. After failing to find an exit out of this place, they decided to move deeper inside and continue their search. They would either find Wang Baoli or a way out. With time, they felt that they would be able to accomplish either one. In fact, there was a great chance of them being able to do both. That was indeed the case. They had plenty of resources on them and had many tricks up their sleeves, including a mystic art that had been passed down to them by their elder, one which was used specifically to dispel such forbidden spells. It required their combined efforts to unleash it, but it specifically countered forbidden array formations. Its power was incredible. Given a few more days, they might really charge out of the dark artifact or find their way to Wang Baoli. However, they couldn't have imagined that within a single day, the tides had turned. At present, they had found a weak spot in the 2nd level of the underground world and were working together to break through it. The earth and heavens shuddered as a whirlpool appeared in the sky. At first, it spun slowly, but as they continued to cast the spell, it began to spin faster. As it spun more quickly, a pathway appeared in the center of the whirlpool. It seemed unstable at the moment, but it was likely that it would stabilize after a while, connecting the 1st level and the 2nd level of the underground world. Once they entered the 1st level, they would be able to blast their way out of the dark artifact. They intended to secure a means of escaping first before creating a pathway through the various levels and seeking out Wang Baoli. Once we reach the 1st level and activate the pathway, we'll immediately seal it, then go and find that damn fatty. Unless he's truly an idiot, there's a chance he's not really called Shui Xian. Why else would he shout out his own name to us? It doesn't matter. He's just like a corpse burial rat. He's just another rat that's better at digging holes. They all had ugly expressions on their faces. When they had been back on their mother planet or even when they had been off pillaging other civilizations, they had never come across a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator who had had so many tricks up his sleeve, who had been so difficult to put down, and who had been so vicious and eccentric. When they recalled that Wang Baoli's cultivation was only at the Foundation Establishment realm, their faces darkened another shade. They admitted to the fact that they had underestimated Wang Baoli at first. That was why they had wanted to capture him alive and hadn't unleashed their most powerful attacks. They had given Wang Baoli a chance. It had been that chance that had the tables turned on them. We'll blast it open first, but let's not spend too much time trying to find him. We must return to the mother planet as soon as possible so we can inform the elder about what is going on here. We can't be late for his birthday either. The stone chest that we found in the ruins of the Cloud Star civilization will definitely earn his approval. That, combined with the news about this galaxy, and we're bound to receive 3 soul conduit pills. The centipede-faced cultivator pondered for a while, then spoke slowly. Fervor appeared in the eyes of the other 2 cultivators when they heard that. They were about to continue unleashing the mystic art and completely stabilize the pathway in the whirlpool. It was then that something unexpected happened. A series of loud rumblings suddenly erupted from both the earth and the heavens. The tombstones erected on the land shook violently as waves of inscription appeared in the second level of the underground world. It was as if the entire second level had been transformed into the 2-dimensional surface of a pool, and a huge stone had been thrown in, causing ripples to spread across the surface. The sudden change sent alarm flashing across their faces. Before they could react, the entire world seemed to be turned upside down all of a sudden. The heavens became the earth, and the burial grounds, the sky. Endless waves of inscription swept across the entire world. Soon, 2 eerie ghoulish heads appeared near them. They were green-faced and fearsome beyond measure, fanged and horned. There were inscriptions on their faces that hovered between brightness and darkness, making them appear creepy and violent. As soon as the ghoulish heads appeared, they widened their jaws and charged towards 2 cultivators. They intended to swallow them whole. They were incredibly fast, making it impossible to escape them. Helpless, the centipede-faced cultivator, who was the leader of the party, and the horse-faced cultivator next to him, tried to fall back as their pupils contracted. There was no time for them to do that at all. Their bodies were swallowed whole by the 2 giant green-faced ghouls. They vanished instantly after that. As soon as they disappeared, the inverted world resumed its original state. The waves of inscription disappeared, as did the series of transformations and discord that had descended upon the world. A deathly silence descended. In the entire land, out of the 3 extraterrestrial cultivators, only the square-faced cultivator remained. A myriad of emotions flashed across his face. He was shaken to the core. He had clearly been shocked by the earlier scene. In his terror, he unleashed the full extent of his cultivation, extending his spiritual senses and stepping back, terrified and on extremely high alert. As he retreated, he didn't hesitate to form a series of rapid hand seals. Scales appeared on his forehead, the edges of his eyes, and on his limbs. There were a total of 9 scales, all of them purple, all of them exuding incredible spirit energy. This was his most powerful attack, but every unleashing of this attack was a drain on his life force. That was why, unless he was forced into a corner, with death looming over him, he wouldn't use it. He had only unleashed it now because of the fright that he had experienced. As intense terror and wariness coursed through his body, the square-faced cultivator let loose a sudden burst of speed. He flew around for 30 minutes and saw that everything around him remained unchanged, no danger surfaced. Did we trigger some trap inside this dark artifact? Suspicions rose within the square-faced cultivator's heart. The sudden appearance of the ghoulish heads and the transformation of the heavens and earth had been absolutely terrifying. His comrades had been swallowed whole, and their fates were now unknown. He was worried and unsettled. Now that everything seemed safe, despite his doubts, he was relieved, albeit barely. Just as he relaxed slightly, a black mist appeared soundlessly and enveloped the entire tombstone-filled land. It was a thin mist at first, but within the span of a few breaths, it blanketed the entire heavens and earth. It spread out suddenly, covering the entire world with a thick mist. If one were to look down from above, one would see a land filled with mist, transformed into a sea of mist. The sight alarmed the square-faced cultivator. He was about to retreat when suddenly, his entire body shuddered. His eyes widened as he saw, beyond the lands and high in the heavens, a region that seemed drenched in blood. Within a single moment, a blood-red moon appeared like a blood imprint in the sky. It exuded an eerie aura. Soft whispers began to echo all around him, amidst the mist and fog, as the blood moon hung in the heavens. Regardless of how hard the square-faced cultivator tried to make out what the whispers were saying, he couldn't discern anything. Horror swelled in his heart, and his face turned pale. Suddenly, his cultivation erupted. In the next moment, the 9 scales on him gave off a bright, dazzling light. This was like a sudden dose of courage. He shouted, "Who is it? Who's trying to scare me?" The square-faced cultivator's pupils suddenly contracted after he shouted. He could see before his eyes, in the mist in front of him, the blurry outline of a lone boat. There was someone sitting on the boat. He was dressed in black robes and before him was a lantern oar. His features were indiscernible due to the thick mist. Regardless, a sudden horror still rose within the square-faced cultivator. It was akin to the instinctive awe that came from within the depths of one's soul. It seemed to be infused in his blood, something that had been passed down from generation to generation through blood, something that his ancestors in the distant past had in their blood. It was fear and terror one harbored towards such a figure. It was the feeling an ordinary person would have upon seeing a god of death rise from the depths of the underworld. It made him tremble. But the square-faced cultivator was after all a nascent soul realm cultivator. He had seen his fair share of deaths and killed his fair share of enemies. Despite his terror, despite his reddening eyes, he knew that this was the moment of life and death. He roared and charged at the boat. With a series of hand seals, the 9 scales on his body gave off an intense light. They formed 9 beams of light that seemed to signify destruction that landed on the boat. The 9 beams landed on the boat instantly. However, the boat seemed as if an illusion. Nothing changed. The 9 beams of light that contained within them immense power and signified destruction passed through the boat and exploded in the distant mists. Fear surged in the square-faced cultivator's heart. His face was pale, and he retreated hastily. Just as he was about to escape, Wang Baoli opened his eyes, uttering 2 words softly. Corpse face. Chapter 465, The Dark Mirror. Chapter 465, The Dark Mirror. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli paid no attention to the escaping square-faced cultivator as it didn't matter how fast he was going. The expression on Wang Baoli's face remained unchanged as he spoke the 2 words quietly. Corpse face. As soon as those words fell out of Wang Baoli's mouth, the mist blanketing the entire world suddenly rolled and rumbled. It erupted suddenly and surged outward in all directions, revealing the land that had been enveloped in mist. However, the exposed land was no longer the same burial grounds. It had become a flat surface, like a mirror. The edges of the mirror continued to expand. Within a few seconds, it caught up with and went past the fleeing square-faced cultivator. Waves of terror surged within the square-faced cultivator's heart as an intense feeling of dread turned his already red eyes even redder, to the color of blood. His gut told him that if he got trapped within the mirror, then, he would definitely be killed. In his panic, his eyes grew wild. He didn't hesitate and instead decided immediately to self-destruct his scales. A series of rumbling began to sound within his body. With each booming sound, one of his scales would explode and burst into a blood-red mist. The mist was then sucked in through his eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. It was like he was breathing in vitality, and his speed quickly increased. He was using everything he had at this moment and running like a madman, but it was of no use. If one were to look from an elevated spot, one would see clearly that this part of the underground world had completely transformed. It had become a flat, even mirror. Not only was the ground a side of the mirror, but the entire world had become a side of the same mirror. Both the sky and the earth were faces of the mirror, and the distance between the sky and the earth was the thickness of the mirror. The panicking square-faced cultivator was racing inside the mirror, trying to escape. That was why, no matter how fast he went and how hard he ran, he would never get out. Because he was already trapped, inside the mirror. This was the power that Wang Baoli could wield, the incomplete powers of the dark artifact. After he branded his artifact spirits and fused it with his array formation, it transformed the world into a mirror. The mirror looked like the dark mirror that Wang Baoli had practiced painting corpse faces on in his dark dream. Wang Baoli lifted his right hand and pointed towards the abyss. A black light shot out from his finger and seemed to pierce the abyss. It landed on the mirror and became the tip of a brush, forming a light stroke. It was like his dark dream, when he had drawn the faces that the souls would have in their next lives. The brush stroke landed on the square-faced cultivator, causing him to shudder and his eyes to widen. He felt an invisible yet immense power, one that seemed to represent fate and the laws of this heaven and earth, descend upon him. He was helpless to fight back. With a sudden rumbling, he felt a gust of wind pass him. When it left, his eyes were gone as well. Senior, please, spare my life. Please, listen to me. I can explain, the man let loose a terrified cry. He was filled with terror, and now his vision was black. Everything that was happening made him instinctively feel that this was an attack from some indescribable presence within the dark artifact, so he hurriedly begged for his life. However, no matter how hard he cried for mercy, it couldn't stop the descent of this incredible power. Wang Baoli drew another experienced stroke. The man's nose, his ears, even his mouth, vanished instantly. His voice was silenced, and only his body remained trembling violently. At the same time, a heart-piercing, soul-shattering agony surfaced in the man's consciousness as Wang Baoli drew his third stroke. He couldn't shout. He could only remain silent as his body was pulled by an immense force, turning what had been thin and weak into a fat and rotund body. This was indeed the case. Wang Baoli had mastered the corpse face mystic art. With a few strokes, he had changed the appearance of the man completely. His body was like a mountain of flesh, and his face was blank with no facial features, it was like a blank board. However, a set of chubby features appeared on this blank board as Wang Baoli continued to paint. As they surfaced, the man could finally scream again. He could finally see what was going on around him. The man soon knew that his pain had just started, with the end nowhere in sight. He heard a dissatisfied snort. Then, his features were wiped clean again. He was given another look. Wang Baoli remained dissatisfied. He felt that he had drawn the man too handsome. With a wave of his hand, he continued to wipe the man's face clean and paint anew. It took a few rounds, and the man kept undergoing indescribable pain every time. Finally, he had no energy left for screaming. In his weakness, bewilderment and despair shone in his eyes. I haven't painted in quite a while, I've become rusty, Wang Baoli grumbled in annoyance at his repeated unsatisfactory works. He lifted his right hand and waved. A loud cracking sound rang out, and the entire mirror, as if hit by a sudden great power, shattered. The face of the mirror broke into pieces, and the square-faced man trapped within shattered alongside the mirror. After his series of actions, Wang Baoli sighed with regret. He grabbed through the air, and a storage bag and a few scales appeared in his hand. He shifted and vanished, alongside the boat beneath his feet. As he left, that part of the underground world gradually resumed its original state. It returned to what it had been, a burial ground. The blood moon in the skies faded away, and everything was as it had been. Out of the 3 extraterrestrial nascent soul realm cultivators, 1 had perished. During this time, on the first level of the underground world, the horse-faced cultivator was racing forward with terror painted on his face. A moment ago, he had been on the second level, attacking a weak point in the underground world with his 2 comrades. The next moment, before he had been able to react, a giant ghoulish head had appeared before him and swallowed him whole. He had thought that would have been the end for him as his vision had blurred. When it had been regained, it had seemed like he had been teleported away and had landed on the first level of the underground world. He had been plagued with doubts and suspicions, drawing the same conclusion as the square-faced cultivator. He thought that they had triggered some trap in the dark artifact. I'll reunite with the rest as soon as possible. The horse-faced cultivator had a solemn expression on his face. He had a feeling that something had changed in this world inside the dark artifact. As to what had changed specifically, he wasn't sure. Regardless of how many times he had tried to reach out to the rest through his voice transmission ring, he couldn't get to them. He had even used the mystic scroll that allowed for a certain degree of interdimensional communication amongst the 3 of them, but hadn't received a reply. This had alarmed him further. I cannot continue this search for them. I have to leave this hellish place immediately. I'll wait outside for them. The horse-faced cultivator took a deep breath and made up his mind. He was about to find the way out when the first level of the underground world underwent a sudden transformation. The multitudes of islands made from bones scattered across the Sea of Souls suddenly rumbled. They erupted suddenly, and the thunderous booms rose to the skies. Alarm surged inside the horse-faced cultivator. He saw with his own eyes countless bones rising to the skies with the explosion of the bone islands. The sky was filled with countless bones. This. The horse-faced cultivator was shocked into silence, alarm crossing his face when the bones gathered together. Within the span of a few seconds, they formed a giant skeletal finger. It was so huge that it spanned 1/10 of the heavens. It was an earth-shattering, terrifying sight. It was followed by the second skeletal finger, then the third, until all 5 fingers appeared. More bones continued to gather, forming a vast and immense palm that connected the 5 fingers. The 5 skeletal fingers curled inward suddenly. In the heavens, a tight fist that spanned almost the entire sky appeared, and was made of pure bones. What is this? The horse-faced cultivator's head was prickling with fear. He could feel death looming over him. He retreated immediately, prepared to do whatever it took to escape. The shock and terror in his heart had reached the extremes. This wasn't the end. As the horse-faced cultivator tried to flee, the entire sea of souls suddenly erupted. Countless souls dashed out madly and charged at the fist of bones, clustering around it, as if forming its layers of blood and flesh. From afar, one could clearly see the tremendous skeletal fist gaining flesh upon its bones at a rapid speed as a vast number of souls fused with it. The blood was black in color, its flesh green, and its skin was lined with green seals. In the blink of an eye, the entire spirit sea had emptied itself. A green-skinned fist that seemed to take up the space of the entire world became the only thing in the world. The fist thundered towards the horse-faced cultivator, whose face was filled with terror and shock. Chapter 466, Fellow Daoist, it's time to begin your journey. Chapter 466, Fellow Daoist, it's time to begin your journey. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. This fist was green-skinned and filled with symbols that had a spectral feel to them. It seemed to have come from hell and was now severely broken. When it landed in civilization, the heavens and earth were unable to withstand it. It was as if the sky was about to be devastated, causing the entire world to be left only with this large fist and the horse-faced cultivator, who was now looking extremely frightened, aghast, and hopeless. The horse-faced cultivator's face was twisted, and as he activated his hand seals and waved his hands, a jade pendant emerged instantly from his chest. The jade pendant was like a spirit body, glowing brilliantly. Once it appeared, it landed before the horse-faced cultivator, instantly transforming into a 1,000-foot-wide jade stele. A colorful glow blocked the fist. The horse-faced cultivator was a nascent soul realm cultivator, and in the face of impending doom, he had a quick reaction and managed to struggle and resist it. In the blink of an eye, it replaced the vast fist in the sky, and landed on the jade stele. The jade stele was large, but looking at it from a distance, it was like a tiny needle relative to the fist. It was so fragile that it was directly broken and turned to dust even before visible cracks could be seen. Wang Baoli had put in a lot of energy in this dark artifact. Over 90% of it may have been damaged, but it was, after all, a superior-grade divine armament. The power of a superior-grade divine armament was minimal, but it was sufficient to crush a nascent soul cultivator. In theory, if Wang Baoli's physical body was sufficiently large, he could directly move the dark artifact away. After that, he could exhibit such powers even if he was in the outside world. However, this was apparently impossible. Unless the dark artifact was restored to a certain extent and could be shrunk, Wang Baoli could only unleash its destructive power in the interior of the dark artifact. Right now, amidst the loud boom and as the jade stele was breaking apart, the horse-faced cultivator screamed pitifully. If it was possible to rewind time, the horse-faced cultivator would never have gone near Mars, for the dark artifact on Mars exerted a force on him that he couldn't resist. Senior, please appease your anger. I'm merely a junior nascent soul realm cultivator. The horse-faced cultivator's voice was trembling. In the process of asking for forgiveness, he retreated at high speed. As he activated his hand seals, a large pink banner that looked like a ribbon appeared beside him, wrapping his surroundings. At a glance, it seemed rather uncoordinated with his movements. However, right now, the horse-faced cultivator couldn't be bothered with it. He took out the most powerful protective dharmic treasure that he had, despite being unwilling to use it. As the ribbon twirled around, it gave off resistive forces. It seemed to be resisting all the other forces, auras, and objects that neared it in its surroundings. At the same time, the horse-faced cultivator still felt that it was insufficient. He bit his tongue and caused blood to start flowing, forming a blood-colored bat before him. The bat screamed shrilly, extending its wings as its body expanded into a length hundreds of feet long. Its wings also grew extremely large, and with the horse-faced cultivator as the center, the bat quickly clasped its wings, enveloping the horse-faced cultivator within it. At the same time, there were tens of other dharmic treasures of different shapes and sizes all being taken out by the horse-faced cultivator. At this life-and-death juncture, he gave it his all, and that included continuing to ask for forgiveness. However, they were futile efforts. As the horse-faced cultivator retreated, the giant fist that decimated the jade stele recovered its force and landed heavily on him. The tens of dharmic treasures were instantly destroyed. The blood-colored bat didn't manage to make a single sound before its wings and body turned into a mush of flesh and blood and vaporized. The ribbon beside the horse-faced cultivator's body, despite being filled with resistive forces, was like a weak lady who had met with a jock that was several times heavier than her. As everything withered, the ribbon was twisted, curling back onto the horse-faced cultivator's body. A force that seemed capable of squashing everything was instantly released. Looking at the situation from a distance, it was like the sky had fallen onto the ground. It wasn't even possible to see a single trace of the horse-faced cultivator's existence, as everything seemed to have been turned into ash and dust. After a moment, the giant fist was slowly lifted and gradually dissipated. All of the flesh and blood turned into spirits, culminating into the sea, while all of the bone ash landed and accumulated into an island. The first level of the underground world appeared to have returned to its original state. Only the storage bag, and items like the ribbon, seemed to have been drawn into the air, into the vast land above the spirit sea. They were grabbed by a hand that had suddenly been extended, and a figure dressed in a black robe suddenly appeared. A lantern oar lay in front of him, and he sat with his legs crossed in a lone boat. He slowly retracted the hand that had grabbed the storage bag and the other items. He lowered his head and went further away into the distance, going in the direction that the lone boat naturally floated on the spirit sea. As Wang Baoli left into the distance, in the third level of this underground world, which was filled with many cities, the leader of the 3 extraterrestrial cultivators, the man with the centipede on his face, looked at his surroundings with an awful expression on his face. Unlike the other 2 people, even though the leader was on the third level, he was trapped in a region that was less than 1,000 feet wide. The periphery of this region was shrouded in a translucent grey glow, and regardless of which method the leader used, he was unable to break through the glow. He was trapped where he was. In reality, after being swallowed by the Gaulish head previously, this was the location that he had reappeared in. Compared to his 2 subordinates, the leader with the centipede on his face was definitely more experienced and knowledgeable. He instantly realized that he didn't go beyond the restrictions. Instead, an enemy had launched an attack and unleashed the force of a dark artifact. His 2 subordinates were likely to have met with fatal danger by now. After all, having the courage to attack an unknown opponent implied that he was confident. Is it an artifact spirit, or that irritating fatty that was about to be skinned? He was solemn and appeared calm, but in reality, he was extremely anxious, as if his mind was set on fire. A sense of crisis was emanating from every inch of his body. It was as if all his cells were screaming at him to leave this place immediately. The fact that the 3 of us were split up means that the mastermind doesn't have the confidence to go against us at the same time. Based on this interpretation, there is a limit to this person's combat power. If it's that fatty, it means that he still isn't skilled enough to handle the dark artifact, or the dark artifact is broken or couldn't be sufficiently supported by his cultivation level. The man with the centipede on his face narrowed his eyes as he made his judgment. At the same time, after he waited for about 5 minutes and realized that there was no one else here besides him, he concluded that his 2 subordinates were likely to have died. Therefore, he is coming to me last. A look of ruthlessness appeared in his eyes. He understood that it was useless to be afraid. At the same time, the fact that he could become a thief on a star with his nascent soul realm cultivation was due to his decisiveness and ferocity. I shall wait, then. The man laughed chillingly, suppressing the anxiety in his heart, and seeming to be awaiting death. He looked and inspected his surroundings after spreading his spirit perception apart. After ensuring that his setup was in place, he felt more comforted. In reality, after arriving here and realizing that he couldn't blast the protective covering away, he decided to put traps here. All the array formations, one-use elixirs, and dharmic treasures that he had brought along with him were laid out in the 1,000-foot wide region. He used the entire situation for setting up his traps. As he inspected the setup and felt comforted by it, he suddenly grew alert. He heard a mumbling voice that seemed to originate from a distance away and was growing clearer by the second. When the heavens and earth separate, the cycle of fate stops. Knowing what happened in the past, the one who suffers now is. Knowing what's to come in the future, the one who is working hard now is. Listening to this bizarre song-like mumbling, his heart palpitated at an increasing speed. Even his spirits grew unstable and his vision blurred. He bit his own tongue and managed to recover through the pain. He breathed quickly as he raised his head to look beyond the protective covering. His pupils constricted, and from the reflection in his eyes, it could be seen that the skies outside the protective screen had turned pitch black, and that a long river had appeared along with the emergence of the tune. The river water blended in with the dark skies but remained clear. Taking a closer look at it, one could even see that countless spirits were present in the water, as if the spirit sea from the first level of the underground world had flowed here and formed a spirit river. If it were just a spirit river, the man with the centipede wouldn't be so shocked. Without a doubt, in the spirit river, a black lone boat was slowly approaching. On the lone boat sat Wang Baoli with his legs crossed. He stood up and raised his right hand. The lantern or that was in front of him slowly rose and landed in his hands. "It's indeed you who was playing a trick on me." A look of ferocity appeared in the eyes of the man with a centipede on his face. He bellowed when he recognized Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli smiled, waving the lantern oar in his hands and mimicking his master in the dark dream. He spoke unclearly. "Fellow Daoist, it's time to begin your journey to the netherworld." Chapter 467, Huge Returns. Chapter 467, Huge Returns. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. As Wang Baoli spoke, the dark river beneath the lone boat expanded, leading down from the sky towards where the burly man was sealed. Instantly, he passed the protective covering using his lone boat, quickly approaching the burly man. Before that, the burly man with the centipede looked anxious, his pupils constricting as he seemed to be attempting to retreat. However, just as the dark river passed through the protective covering, and as Wang Baoli arrived on the lone boat, the ferocity in the burly man's eyes intensified, and he roared loudly. "To hell with the journey!" As he screamed, he waved his hands. Immediately, in a 1,000-foot wide diameter around him, flying swords emerged from underground, forming a sword fleet. That wasn't all. Bright rays of light emerged from the ground in the center of the sword feet, interweaving with each other and transmogrifying into an array diagram. The force of an array formation was unleashed right at this moment. Furthermore, figures identical to that of the burly man appeared in the blink of an eye in every corner, making it difficult for one to differentiate the actual person from his figures. A sharp and ear-piercing scream reverberated as well, and was a sound that seemed capable of breaking a rock. The ground began to crack apart, and a frighteningly large centipede emerged from within, as if it was about to swallow Wang Baoli, who was fast approaching. Its terrifying orifice could be seen clearly, and its body was covered with countless sharp thorns that gripped anyone who saw it with fear. Describing the scene, it seemed as if they appeared slowly, but in reality, they were all put in place the moment Wang Baoli entered the confines of the protective covering. It was as fast as lightning. However, all the preparations, all the methods of attack, all the flying sword dharmic treasures, and even the terrifying-looking centipede were powerless in the face of a dark artifact. Furthermore, Wang Baoli knew that the burly man was the leader. As such, when he attacked, not only did he unleash the remaining power of the dark artifact, he even adopted the methods of the dark sect. The lone boat continued to move forward, and the dark river continued to flow. However, what changed was that Wang Baoli began singing the bizarrely tuned song, which seemed to harness some sort of mysterious force. When the heavens and earth separate, the cycle of fate stops. The moment the rhyme was sung, the entire dark artifact shook. A force whose source couldn't be detected emerged suddenly. It didn't appear out of nowhere, nor did it come from somewhere else. Instead, it was formed right there and then. To put it more accurately, it was formed as a result of the rhyme. As it reverberated, the numerous flying swords in the air froze in motion. The dharmic treasures and the array formation also calmed down. Even the huge, terrifying centipede stopped in its tracks, motionless. It was as if everything had been frozen. The countless avatars of the burly man dissipated instantly like popped bubbles. The only one that remained was the one nearest to Wang Baoli, who was now carrying a look of disbelief on his face. This is impossible. Time has stopped. It's impossible. This is the legendary consciousness Dharmic Tao that only the top mighty figures of the galaxy realm can exhibit. The burly man was shaking vigorously with shock. He couldn't control himself as he shrieked in surprise, his body moving back. Even though he was doubtful about everything that was happening, thinking that it was impossible, he still retreated without hesitation. He didn't dare to fight or battle anymore. Now, the only thought in his mind was to escape. Everything here was so bizarre that he shuddered at the thought of it. However, just as he stepped back, he suddenly stopped. A look of fear and astonishment intensified in his eyes as he looked at his own body, which was now in front of him, in shock. There was a body in front of him, standing there motionlessly with an expression of fear frozen on its face as if it had been frozen for an eternity. Looking at the body in front of him, the burly man trembled as he lowered his head to look at himself. What he saw was a translucent soul. It's not time that has been frozen. As the burly man's soul trembled and continued to retreat, a protective screen instantly emerged. However, right there and then, he heard the second line of the song. Knowing what happened in the past, the one who suffers now is, as the song reverberated, the burly man's soul trembled. He saw Wang Baoli dressed in a black robe, stepping on the lone boat, and leaving into the distance on the dark river instead of approaching him. However, for some unknown reason, he didn't feel that he was liberated. Instead, a frightening sense that catastrophe was about to strike arose in his mind. He retreated once again until he was so far away that he could no longer see Wang Baoli. Despite that, he realized, in shock, that his surroundings were still pitch black. If it were simply pitch black, it wouldn't have been a huge matter. However, in the darkness, several blurry-looking spirits could be seen, and they were similar to the ones he saw in the spirit sea on the first level. Impossible, this is impossible. The burly man's soul shivered. A look of hopelessness appeared in his eyes, and Wang Baoli's song sounded in his ears again, fleeting and inconsistent. Knowing what's to come in the future, the one who is working hard now is. This sound reverberated in his soul for a long time, until the burly man's consciousness began to become unclear. The moment it was completely blurred out, the burly man seemed to enter a state of clarity before death. He finally understood why his surroundings were in complete darkness. He saw the spirit river that Wang Baoli was sailing on in his lone boat when he still had a body previously. He saw that there were countless spirits in the spirit river, and his spirit was amongst them. After realizing this, his consciousness dissipated. As it dissipated, the spirit river that he was in began to disappear gradually, together with the lone boat, as it flowed from the sky to the ground. When the lone boat next appeared, it was on the third level of the underground world, in the public square Wang Baoli had set off from. There were still numerous corpses and ferocious beasts kneeling there, trembling. Wang Baoli's face was pale, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The lone boat beneath his feet, the black robe he was wearing, and the lantern or he was holding began to grow unclear. This continued until they eventually disappeared completely, transforming into 3 individual artifact spirits. One burly man, one elder, and a young boy. When the 3 artifact spirits appeared, they hurriedly knelt before Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli shut his eyes, calming the churning blood qi in his body. The previous 3 battles seemed easy, but in reality, he had made use of the power of the dark artifact. Despite the dark artifact being damaged, Wang Baoli still had to use a lot of effort in controlling it, given his cultivation level. That was especially so as those 3 battles were in an entirely different format from those he had experienced before. From the inheritance and sense that he had obtained through the dark dream, he vaguely felt that the reason why superior-grade divine armaments were so powerful was that they could unleash these rule-like divine powers. It's a pity that my cultivation level isn't high enough and that the dark artifact is damaged and can't be shrunk. Otherwise, if I could carry it around with me, if I were to call myself the Federation President after leaving this place and anyone were to disagree, all I would need to do was sing a soul song to them. With that thought, Wang Baoli was extremely agitated yet depressed. As he experienced the torrent of emotions, he sighed. I'm getting arrogant. I need to stay humble. Wang Baoli patted his tummy, suppressing the churning blood qi in his body. He didn't bother to tend to his injuries immediately. Instead, he quickly took out the gains that he had obtained from the 3 battles. In reality, the 2 nascent Souls Realm cultivators exhausted numerous dharmic treasures in the first and second battle. It wasn't that Wang Baoli didn't want to stop them, but the fact was that despite Wang Baoli acting like everything was a walk in the park, the calmness on his face was all a strong front. The truth was that he was about to go crazy looking at those dharmic treasures being destroyed. In his mind, the possessions of the trio were like his own. However, he couldn't control the power of the dark artifact such that it would only wipe out humans but not damage the dharmic treasures. As he sighed, Wang Baoli opened up the 3 storage bags before him. After rummaging through them, his eyes widened, and his breathing quickened. Even though the dharmic treasures of the trio were mostly damaged, there were still over 10 intact ones, including 1 tricolored flying sword that could transmogrify into a sword fleet comprised of countless flying swords. There was also the ribbon from the horse-faced cultivator, the scales from the square-faced cultivator, as well as other dharmic treasures that the trio didn't use. Wang Baoli couldn't tell the grade of those dharmic treasures due to differences in culture between the cultivators and the Federation. However, he had a hunch that since the nascent Soul Realm cultivators could use them, that they were definitely treasures. He was filled with excitement at the thought. I've struck gold. Other than that, there were numerous crystals that looked like spirit stones. There was also a jade slip, though he wasn't familiar with the words on the jade slip. At the same time, there were 30-odd pill bottles, as well as 2 sets of scaly armor, and a centipede sealed by the force of the dark artifact. This wasn't all. Soon, Wang Baoli trembled in shock as he stared into the storage bag of the leader. There was a black jellyfish in hibernation, as well as glowing rocks that piled up like a mountain. This is a sea glutton? And these stones? They are stellar sources. Wang Baoli's eyes were wide with disbelief as he stared dazedly at the items. His mind buzzed with activity as he noticed a black stone box placed in the corner of the leader's storage bag. The material of this stone box was also a stellar source. In terms of quality, it exceeded that of ordinary stellar sources significantly. There was even an aura of antiquity and age. It was as if it had existed for a long time and carried the traces of time with it. Chapter 468, Mysterious Stone Box. Chapter 468, Mysterious Stone Box. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Looking at the gains before him, Wang Baoli still felt that he had struck a small pot of gold. Even though he had already seen astonishing amounts of materials presented to him while refining dharmic artifacts and dharmic armaments as a dharmic armament cultivator, he was deeply astounded by the gains he had obtained this time. His breathing quickened uncontrollably as he looked at the items before him, as well as the materials in the 3 storage bags, some of which were crucial for refining pills, and some of which were crucial for refining artifacts. He didn't recognize most of them, but based on the concentration of spirit chi given off them, it wasn't difficult to tell that they were all shockingly valuable. This is robbery. An increasingly bright glow flashed across Wang Baoli's eyes. He felt that this was a road to wealth. Even though it was extremely risky, he could rest for the next 10 years if he were to succeed. I estimate that only a small proportion of all this belongs to the Federation. Most of it was likely gathered by those 3 fellas from elsewhere. Wang Baoli suppressed his irregular breathing. A look of clarity appeared in his eyes as he swept glances at the items, then towards the 3 artifact spirits, then at his surroundings again. Thoughts began to fill his mind. If the news about me killing the 3 extraterrestrial nascent soul realm cultivators gets out, the credit would be sufficient to promote me, huh? The fact that I've gotten the stellar source back for the Federation is impressive too. However, there's no way I can tell others about it. Wang Baoli was in a dilemma. He was sure that if he obtained credit for what he had done, then the issue with the dark artifact would definitely be exposed, which would bring him a series of trouble in the future. Even though those troubles wouldn't threaten his life, he would be caught in a bitter situation, leaving behind a bad record. Just like what had been outlined in the high officials' autobiographies, one must believe in the kindness of others, but one must never bank on others' kindness, and most definitely, one should never give others the chance to take advantage of them. If not, not only would the person involved be the one who would have to pay the price, their friends and elders, who were originally kind but developed evil thoughts, would be implicated too. After a period of silence, a look of determination appeared in Wang Baoli's eyes. He seemed to have already decided that he wouldn't tell anyone about this incident. As for the Federation's resources, he would utilize them first and then pay it back when he became capable of doing so in the future. Wang Baoli wasn't a saint, but a mere small fry. Now that he had made his decision, he no longer troubled over it. Instead, he immediately looked at the 3 artifact spirits and spoke. Of these items, are there any that are necessary for restoring the dark artifact? The state preceptor, as well as the young boy, looked at the items and were both tempted. However, Wang Baoli had already made plans to restore the dark sampan previously, and as such, despite both of them being tempted, they could only reveal their desire in their eyes. The burly dark sampan artifact spirit sounded calm, seemingly also analyzing the items. Eventually, he greeted Wang Baoli and spoke with a deep voice. Master, theoretically, all these items can be used to restore the dark sampan. This is especially so for the stellar source mountain, which would help in restoring the dark sampan significantly despite being of ordinary quality. The materials over there contain spirit chi, and unique capabilities that would be extremely helpful to refining the artifacts of the boat. That is even so for those assorted armaments. After breaking them apart and distilling their essence, they could be used for restoration. Next, this centipede has an unusual bloodline, but it seems to have been refined in the wrong manner. If it were to be suppressed inside the dark sampan, the force of the dark artifact could be used to assimilate and evolve it, in order to unleash even more power. However, the disadvantage of this is that once it becomes assimilated by the dark artifact, it wouldn't be able to be separated from it. As for the sea glutton, I suggest that you use the dark artifact to suppress it and wipe out the markings on it. When your cultivation level reaches that of the nascent soul realm, you can use the sea glutton to travel through the universe. Listening to those words, Wang Baoli was happy, but he felt heartache at the same time. He was happy that the items were useful for restoration, but his heart was aching as he had to lose them even before he had the chance to enjoy them. How much could all these precious babies restore the dark sampan? Wang Baoli asked immediately after pondering and suppressing the ache in his heart. They should restore the dark sampan by about 10%. The dark sampan artifact spirit answered after making some calculations. Only 10%? The ache in Wang Baoli's heart grew. On the other hand, the dark sampan artifact spirit was now expressionless and silent. The young boy and state preceptor beside him felt happy looking at Wang Baoli's facial expression. They even vaguely felt that it was great having an owner again. At the very least, they could eat whatever they want, and they simply need to send out orders for what they desired. Everything had become very simple. Wang Baoli struggled internally for a moment. He looked at his babies and caressed the materials. He was still unable to make a decision when the dark sampan artifact spirit spoke calmly. Master, once the dark sampan has been restored to about 10%, it will release the force of a superior grade divine armament. These assorted items are worthless. Even if only 1% of it was restored, a protective covering that those below spirit immortal realm wouldn't be able to break apart would be formed. To you, someone who cannot bring the dark artifact away, that would be the best option. I know. Assimilate what should be assimilated, suppress what should be suppressed, and change what should be changed. Wang Baoli sighed but quickly raised his hands, setting aside the tricolored flying sword, the ribbon, the 3 remaining scales, all the jade slips and pills, as well as several dharmic treasures that he thought were useful. These cannot be refined. As for the rest, refine them. Wang Baoli spoke with an ache in his heart. He couldn't bear to watch any further. He swiftly picked up the jade box, but when he tried to open it to no avail, he looked at the dark sampan artifact spirit. This is something valuable, is it? The dark sampan artifact spirit remained expressionless. He first waved his right hand, immediately keeping all the items that Wang Baoli had given consent to refine, including the assimilation of the centipede and the suppression of the sea glutton. After that, it looked towards the jade box with a doubtful look in its eyes. This stone box. I can't figure out what it is. It seems like an accessory box for a female. As the dark sampan artifact spirit spoke, the old dark robe artifact spirit state preceptor gloated. He cleared his throat but remained silent. Wang Baoli lifted his head to look at the old man. After making a guess of his intentions, he snorted under his breath, thinking about how he had read the high official's autobiographies since he was a young boy. Now that he was at primary rank 3 and the city lord of a city, he was extremely familiar with instilling obedience in his subordinates. Now, without thinking much, he pointed at the young boy. "Do you know?" Realizing that Wang Baoli didn't direct the question to him, the old state preceptor was surprised. The young boy beside him was now deep in thought and only spoke after a moment. "I think that this is a stationary box." Listening to the young boy's answer, the state preceptor was even more delighted. Now, he raised his head, preparing himself for Wang Baoli's question. He had even made plans to make use of his answer to let Wang Baoli know that of the 3 artifact spirits, he was the most valuable one. "Yes, I think what both of you said makes sense. That should be the case." Wang Baoli nodded with a satisfied look. From the items he kept aside, he chose one and tossed it to the young boy. "This is your reward." The young boy grabbed hold of the dharmic treasure, and in his excitement, he swallowed it in a few mouthfuls. It could be felt clearly that his spirit body was significantly nourished. "All right, all of you can disperse. I plan to start my refinement process, so I will leave. You must be obedient here, and take note not to provoke the beast tide. The city above it is mine." With that, Wang Baoli waved his hand and was about to take his leave. However, the old state preceptor grew anxious seeing how the dark sampan and the young boy were both rewarded. Therefore, he didn't play any more tricks and hurriedly spoke. "Master, I know what this jade box is." It's not a stationary box." Wang Baoli was gloating internally but put a surprised expression on his face. When he looked towards the old state preceptor, he also swept his gaze at the young boy, which made him tense up. The young boy looked towards the state preceptor as well, with unfriendliness in his eyes. He wouldn't have behaved this way if Wang Baoli hadn't rewarded him. However, now that he had eaten the reward, it made the young boy unhappy towards the state preceptor. The old state preceptor sighed, realizing that his owner wasn't easily tricked. With a few words, Wang Baoli had sowed discord between him and the lantern or artifact spirit that loved to act young. However, based on his owner's personality, he understood that if he continued to withhold the information, his owner would find ways to punish him. Therefore, the old state preceptor sighed once again, bowing deeply towards Wang Baoli before speaking hurriedly. "Master, this stone box should be an envelope. Perhaps there is a letter inside it. When I was floating out there, I once saw an ancient record that contained some secrets about the Never-Ending Clan. One of them wrote that in ancient times, the gods of the Never-Ending Clan once created a unique envelope from the stellar source. However, the maker is unknown." Chapter 469, Extraterrestrial Dharmic Treasure. Chapter 469, Extraterrestrial Dharmic Treasure. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. "Envelope? Can you open it?" The old state preceptor's answer made Wang Baoli feel refreshed and curious. After asking that question and seeing the old state preceptor shake his head, Wang Baoli picked up the stone box and examined it in detail silently. He couldn't find a link between it and an envelope no matter how he looked at it. However, seeing how confident the state preceptor was, he thought about it, and with a mix of trust and suspicion, he took out a dharmic treasure and tossed it to the old state preceptor. Then, he gazed intently at the young boy. The young boy grew nervous instantly, but he didn't dare to blame Wang Baoli. Therefore, he vented all his dissatisfaction towards the state preceptor. The young boy felt sabotaged by the fact that the old codger with the torn clothing knew what the box was and didn't say so, only doing so after he had spoken. After noting the incident down, the young boy hurriedly tried to think of ways to mediate the situation. When it saw the pill bottle, its eyes lit up, and it hurriedly spoke. "Master, those pills shouldn't be eaten carelessly. After all, as the system of each civilization is different, there are differences in physical attributes. It is likely that supplements to them would be poison for us. However, I am quite proficient in recognizing pills, and I can solve this problem for you, Master." As the young boy spoke, he quickly went towards the pill bottles. He touched and smelled them, eventually choosing 2 of the pill bottles and placing them in front of Wang Baoli. "Master, there are no side effects for the pills in these 2 bottles. They are the daily supplements for nascent soul realm cultivators. As for the other pills, despite having some side effects, It would only require a small expenditure of time and life essence to alter the impurities in them, making them suitable for you, Master. The young boy spoke hurriedly. Seeing that Wang Baoli looked satisfied, the young boy heaved a sigh of relief. He even felt excited as he looked at the old state preceptor while gloating. This made Wang Baoli feel comforted, but at the same time, he pitied the old state preceptor. Standing in the shoes of the old state preceptor, he thought that the state preceptor wasn't afraid of his competitor being more capable, only afraid of them being more of an idiot than him. However, that wasn't a matter Wang Baoli would be troubled about. Instead, he was impressed by the young boy. Therefore, he smiled more amiably at the young boy, which made the young boy even more excited as he took away the remaining pills, thumping his chest and declaring that they would only need a maximum of a few months to remove the impurities in them. With that, he turned and vanished. The old state preceptor felt extremely annoyed, but he didn't show it on his face. He greeted Wang Baoli respectfully before disappearing before him. As for the burly boat spirit, he remained expressionless from start till end. It wasn't that he was stupid, but to a certain extent, tasked with the responsibility to help Wang Baoli ascend the throne. He was the guardian of the dark artifact that Wang Baoli trusted most. Just like this, as the three artifact spirits dispersed on their own, Wang Baoli gripped his right hand and brought the tricolored flying sword towards him. After taking a closer look at it, based on the strong aura given off by the flying sword, Wang Baoli felt that this treasure was definitely not 7th grade but could be 8th grade or higher. He felt this way despite being unable to find out its grade. 9th grade Dharmic armament? It doesn't seem like it. Of these precious babies, no remnant spirit consciousness that is characteristic of a Dharmic armament exists. They seem to simply be armament items. After thinking about it for a while, Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes and made seals with his right hand, pointing towards the tricolored flying sword. Instantly, the flying sword shook, and as Wang Baoli's spirit chi entered it, it glowed brightly a few times before quickly dimming. It's not because my cultivation is insufficient. Instead, it's the wrong method of activating it. If it were someone else, they would have long run out of ideas and would have sought the help of a Dharmic armament cultivator to solve the problem. However, Wang Baoli was a Dharmic armament cultivator himself, and he was also a pro at refining 7th grade Dharmic armaments. Therefore, a glow flashed across his eyes. As he raised his right hand, a ball of fire appeared out of thin air. Wang Baoli felt that the temperature wasn't high enough, and as he waved his right hand, a flash of lightning appeared from his palm and wriggled into the fireball. That seemed to have stimulated the fireball such that it immediately expanded. That wasn't all. The dark core inside Wang Baoli's body shook, and his dark core cultivation surfaced as a result, causing a chilly aura to appear around the fireball's exterior. The two balls of fire, hot on the inside and cold on the outside, originally seemed to be going against each other, but the lightning connected them. With Wang Baoli's cultivation suppressing them, the two were integrated with each other, and when he pointed at it, the ball of fire instantly enveloped the tricolored flying sword. The moment it enveloped the sword, Wang Baoli quickly activated his hand seals. Inscriptions appeared out of thin air, and as the flying sword was being infiltrated by the fireballs, the inscriptions were inscribed on the tricolored flying sword. He had planned to refine the tricolored flying sword for a second time. It seemed to be a refinement process, but was actually a process to break it down. The inscriptions were like a key, constantly opening up and simplifying the mysteries of a system that was different from that of the Federation. As the mysteries were solved, the initial persistence of the tricolored flying sword was quickly overcome. It began disintegrating into numerous small parts, revealing thin black threads within it. These thin threads seemed to be formed from some sort of energy. They were like a linkage that joined all the parts together. That made Wang Baoli's eyes glow. This was the first time he made contact with the structure of a non-Federation Dharmic treasure. His understanding of Dharmic armament seemed to deepen through the process of breaking the foreign treasures apart. It was as if he had learned from a knowledgeable person. There are no inscriptions in their Dharmic treasures. Instead, they are composed of numerous tiny parts joined together by these peculiar energy threads that make the entire Dharmic treasure whole. Wang Baoli created seals with both his hands at an even faster speed. After half an hour, having broken the tricolored flying sword apart completely into many smaller components, Wang Baoli raised his left hand and gripped a stone the size of a fist from amongst the pile of components. This rock is the core of this dharmic treasure, and also the source of the energy threads. Wang Baoli looked at the stone in his hand. He didn't need to analyze it for long to recognize that it was a stellar source. It was different from the stellar source taken away by the artifact spirit, as it had been through a unique refinement process. Even as a dharmic armament master, Wang Baoli was unable to decipher the rock. However, having reached this step, it is still possible to control the extraterrestrial dharmic armament, just that the force would be slightly smaller. After thinking about it, Wang Baoli felt that rather than it being useless, he could control it in his own way, and it wouldn't go to waste. As for the way to do it, Wang Baoli had already found a method when he was breaking it apart. He would inscribe inscriptions on the stellar source to assist him in controlling the treasure. It was similar to tying a thin string in the mechanisms of a wooden puppet's 4 limbs. The string would be controlled by Wang Baoli. He may not be able to control this treasure, but he could control the strings and indirectly unleash part of the force of this extraterrestrial dharmic armament. As for the ribbon and the scales, they were also treated similarly by Wang Baoli. After several days, he had completed inscribing the inscriptions on them. He waved his hand, and the tricolored flying sword shone brightly, surrounding him with large numbers of flying swords that formed a sword formation. At the same time, a ribbon also circled him like those belonging to the legendary Neza 1, looking extremely impressive. These 2 dharmic treasures were so astonishingly powerful that they were similar to 8th grade dharmic armaments. If I have a chance, I need to learn how to refine these extraterrestrial dharmic treasures. Wang Baoli looked satisfyingly at the flying sword beside him. He waved his hand and kept the flying sword and the ribbon, before turning his palm around, where the 3 scales were being held. It's a pity that the cracks are so severe that they can only be a single-use bomb. They should be relatively powerful. Wang Baoli patted his tummy. Feeling satisfied, he began to think about whether he should leave, especially after he thought about the 5-generation Sky Clan's plot to convert the new city into a special zone. Wang Baoli rolled his eyes, and his mind grew active. Previously, he would be extremely furious at that. However, everything was different now. To Wang Baoli, the 5-generation Sky Clan's plot gave him an opportunity. However, there is still a problem. I have formed a dark core, but I learned the lightning art in Ethereal Dao College. Once my cultivation dissipates, the dark core will inevitably be revealed. Wang Baoli rubbed his glabella before gritting his teeth and lowering his head to look at the pills. Maybe I can try to make a lightning core using the Lightning Dao, first volume. This way, I will be a Lightning Dao core formation cultivator on the surface, but in reality, I will be different from others, with 2 cores. Wang Baoli cleared his throat, waving his raised right hand. With his power over the dark artifact, he sealed his surroundings and sat with his legs crossed. He gripped his right hand and took out the pills that the young boy said was capable of raising one's cultivation without any side effects. If nascent soul realm cultivators can raise their cultivation with this, the effect will definitely be greater for me if I eat it. Chapter 470, Spectating. Chapter 470, Spectating. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. After eating this, I won't be so bloated that I will explode, right? Wang Baoli grabbed the pill bottle and took out 2 pills. The pills were purple-colored and were without any herbal fragrance, only having complex rune marks on them. Even though he didn't understand them, based on his experience, Wang Baoli still felt that the pills were impressive. He was somewhat nervous. He felt that they were pills that belonged to nascent soul realm cultivators, and he had no idea if he, as a core formation realm cultivator, could digest them. What's the big deal? It's just a pill. If nascent soul realm cultivators can ingest them, so can I. After struggling internally for a brief moment, Wang Baoli lowered his head to look at his own body, and a look of determination appeared in his eyes. I'm a lucky person, and I definitely won't die from this. Furthermore, I'm still inside the dark artifact. What's more, the most important thing is, I am the slimmest and most handsome person in the Federation, and I can put my weight here. Nothing to fret about. With that thought, Wang Baoli immediately began to break the pill apart forcefully. It's quite tough. Wang Baoli stared and used more strength. he tore half of it out and tossed it into his mouth. As the pill entered his mouth, a sour and spicy sensation instantly filled Wang Baoli's mouth. The sourness was like swallowing a large bowl of wild grapes in a single mouthful. All his sense of taste seemed to have been lost instantly, and all he could feel was a gushing feeling that charged towards his brain. Wang Baoli couldn't control himself as his body stiffened, and his facial expression twisted as he widened his eyes. This is bad. However, before Wang Baoli could adapt, the sourness disappeared, replaced by a spiciness that far exceeded that of the death pills he swallowed previously. The spiciness was like a bomb exploding in his mouth, the impact reverberating in his mind. Arf! Wang Baoli wanted to scream, but couldn't produce any sound. He wanted to find himself some water, but even before he found it, activity exploded noisily in his mind again, such that he couldn't even scream. He held his throat tightly, jumping up from his original cross-legged position, and began running in all directions like a maniac. This continued for the next 10 minutes, after which, Wang Baoli fell down with a loud bang and fainted. Before he lost consciousness, the only question in his mind was why he decided to seek death for himself. Despite having lost consciousness, his body continued convulsing without him feeling anything. His limbs behaved as if they had been electrocuted, raising and lowering by themselves even though Wang Baoli had collapsed on the floor. This not only shocked the surrounding ferocious beasts, but also the 3 artifact spirits who appeared after sensing something was amiss. They surrounded Wang Baoli, staring at his convulsing body with their mouths agape with shock, before looking at each other with a puzzled look. Our new owner didn't just die in this manner, did he? The young boy mumbled, a look of confusion in his eyes. The scene before him was too unbelievable and unexpected. The old state preceptor who was standing in a corner cleared his throat, looking approvingly at the young boy and patting his head hard with his right hand. Well done. The young boy was confused, as he didn't understand what the old state preceptor meant by that. However, he quickly realized what was going on and was immediately gripped with shock. He understood that Wang Baoli had just eaten the pills that he claimed had no issues. The young boy was on the brink of tears. Seeing the old state preceptor approaching him, wanting to give him a pat, a look of ruthlessness appeared in his eyes. He was about to retaliate when the burly dark sampan artifact spirit spoke calmly. Enough, both of you. This has nothing to do with old Or. Master himself was the one who wanted to break apart the pills before swallowing them. Usually, the external parts of the pills would have been processed such that, after being swallowed, the taste of the materials inside them wouldn't be experienced. However, Master is tough and strong, with an unusually high body weight, so nothing will happen to him. As the boat spirit spoke, a strong spirit chi suddenly emerged in waves from Wang Baoli, who was still convulsing on the ground. Initially, the spirit chi flowed out of his stomach like a stream, but before long, it was like a voracious river churning in his body. By the time the boat spirit finished speaking, the spirit chi had become like the ocean, crashing vigorously. Spirit chi flowed out from Wang Baoli's sweat pores, forming a spirit fog that spread in all directions. At the same time, the unconscious Wang Baoli, being stimulated by the spirit chi, was momentarily awakened. Even though he was still in a state of confusion, he instinctively activated Lightning Dao, first volume. As he unleashed it, sounds of thunder emerged from within his body. The spirit chi seemed to be drawn by it, surging directly into Wang Baoli's meridians and traveling throughout his entire body. Eventually, it seeped into the 3rd lotus seed head whose petals had just opened up. After seeping into it, the spirit chi was like nourishment and a maturation agent to the petals that had yet to become a lotus. It caused the petals to bloom visibly, and in the process, arc-shaped lightning was produced and traveled swiftly within Wang Baoli's body. The entire process continued for 6 hours. As the explosive waves of spirit chi gradually died down, Wang Baoli's body returned to normal. He slowly opened his eyes, looking confused. At the same time, an incredible pain spread throughout his body, and he uncontrollably groaned in discomfort. The 3 artifact spirits who were beside him initially had disappeared before he regained consciousness. As he screamed painfully, Wang Baoli struggled to climb up. He shuddered when he recalled the scene just before losing consciousness. The sensation of sourness and spiciness frightened him. Right now, his first instinct was to give up, but at that moment, he widened his eyes. He felt that the petal that was originally on the green lotus inside his body had become a lotus that was in the process of blooming. It's effective. Wang Baoli was pleasantly surprised. He hurriedly stood up and activated his cultivation. As he waved his hands, flashes of lightning transformed with a frightening sound. After gauging its force, Wang Baoli concluded that his skills in exhibiting the lightning Dao cultivation technique, as someone who had perfected Foundation Establishment Realm cultivation, had improved. It was akin to a pseudo-core formation realm cultivator, without him needing to use the power of the dark core. This was the result of just half a pill. That made Wang Baoli extremely happy. He gritted his teeth as he picked up the other half of the pill and swallowed it. Then, he immediately stiffened, gripping his throat and falling onto the floor as he screamed painfully. He convulsed as he lost consciousness, and the 3 artifact spirits reappeared as spectators then. He's godly. What a ruthless person. How strong. The 3 artifact spirits discussed amongst themselves. Seeing that Wang Baoli wouldn't die from it, they disappeared before Wang Baoli regained consciousness. In this manner, Wang Baoli began his torturous cultivation process. It wasn't that he didn't want to swallow a pill whole. In reality, he felt that he should proceed in small steps. If he was too forceful, he might just kill himself in the process by accident. In reality, Wang Baoli was correct to think this way. If he really swallowed the entire pill in one go, he might be able to survive, but he would definitely injure his body. Taking half of it at a time like he was doing allowed his body to absorb it. Even though it was painful, there would be no consequences. Therefore, after swallowing the 2 pills, the lightning in Wang Baoli's body struck continuously. As the lotus flower went into full bloom and the lotus seed head appeared, a lightning core was produced from within the lotus seed head. A core formation aura that had a characteristic of lightning instantly emerged from Wang Baoli's body. It spread in all directions, and the sound of his laughter reverberated amidst his excitement. Wang Baoli didn't know if there were other people like himself who had managed to produce 2 cores. However, after trying it out, he realized that the 2 cores were like a transit point. As his spirit chi seeped into the lightning core lotus seed head, the lightning that was produced gave off a force that was similar to a core formation realm cultivator with a lightning characteristic. When it seeped into the dark core, everything was activated. The force that belonged to the dark core instantly spread. The 2 parts interacted with each other. Even though the process was still not smooth, it seemed that as long as the body got used to it and as he grew more familiar with it, Wang Baoli could interchange his core formation power according to his preferences during battle. At the same time, there was also a change that surprised Wang Baoli, and that was the high concentration of the spirit chi and meridians in his body. The meridians and spirit chi had been unleashed once previously when he achieved a breakthrough and reached the dark core stage. When the meridians spread, the spirit chi had also been boosted. Right now, what he did was similar to having spread and boosted his meridians and spirit chi twice. That made his combat powers exceed that of his peers significantly, despite him still being an early-stage core formation realm cultivator. After realizing this, Wang Baoli was extremely delighted. In his happiness, he began putting away all the items and decided to leave the barrier. He was in high spirits, and as the 3 artifact spirits watched him with respect, he emerged out of the barrier and stepped into the underground passageway of the city. Wang Baoli patted his tummy arrogantly, taking out his voice transmission ring to send a voice transmission to the Martian colony governor. However, the governor didn't pick up, so Wang Baoli decided to leave a message. Governor, I, Wang Baoli, didn't disappoint your expectations. After months of seclusion, I've reached a breakthrough in my cultivation without any difficulty. I've entered the core formation realm. Chapter 471, Baoli is a good kid. Chapter 471, Baoli is a good kid. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli didn't wait for the Martian colony governor to reply. He happily sent another voice transmission to the sect lord of the Ethereal Dao College. However, no one picked up his call. Wang Baoli was already experienced with such matters, so he left a message. Sect Lord, I, Wang Baoli, didn't disappoint your expectations. After months of seclusion, I've reached a breakthrough in my cultivation without any difficulty. I've entered the core formation realm. Wang Baoli was simply overcome with excitement. He hurriedly left the Federation president another message. He felt that his reaching the core formation realm was an important milestone. The entire Federation should be celebrating, and he should be receiving congratulatory gifts from important people. That was the only respectable way to treat a primary rank 3 noble. As Wang Baoli was sending messages to the governor and the others, the governor was sitting inside her office in the Martian colony city. On her desk was a jade slip. It exuded a strange light that enveloped her entire person. The same thing was happening to the sect lord of the ethereal Tao College, as well as the other 3 sect lords of the other 3 Tao colleges. Similarly, to the head senator and a few senators of the Senate, and even the representatives of the other political forces such as the 5-generation Sky Clan and the upper echelons of the military. The various important figures in the Federation were currently sitting in their respective offices, enveloped in the light of identical jade slips. That was why even though they noticed Wang Baoli's voice transmission, they didn't have the time to attend to it. This was because, at this moment, they were conducting a Federation summit via this unique jade slip. The location of this summit was the Federation capital on Earth, on the top floor of a towering building whose design was a combination of the sun, moon, and stars. Within this building was an enormous conference room. 9 statues stood on the sides of the conference room, each statue exuding an intense battle aura. Within the circle of statues was an enormous, oval-shaped, stone table. More than a dozen large chairs lined the table, and projected on each chair was an illusory figure. There was the Martian colony governor, the sect lords of the 4 Tao colleges, the representative of the Trilunarist Corporation, the head senator, as well as Lin Yu and 2 other senators. There were also 5 elders from the 5-generation Sky Clan, the Grand Elder from the Galactic Dusk sect, and the sect lord of the Plume Manifestation Carnate sect. A great proportion of the most important figures of the entire Federation were in this room. The Federation president had no projection. He was there in person, seated in the chair in the center of the table. Even though there was a difference in size between his person and the chair, the aura that he exuded formed a Dharma body that was the exact same size as the other attendees. His presence overpowered the rest. This was the 5th summit. It had been going on for an entire day and was about to reach its end. The main issues they discussed during the summit were the Mercury crisis and the whereabouts of the 3 extraterrestrial cultivators. However, no matter how hard the Federation searched, they were unable to locate traces of these 3 extraterrestrial cultivators. There were many views about this, but no conclusion was reached. The intense defensive measures that the Federation had put in place, and the activation of the array formations across the entire solar system was expending a great deal of energy. To the Federation, which was only in the dawn of its cultivation civilization, the longer they kept this up, the more challenges they would face maintaining the status quo. They finally reached a consensus as the summit neared its end. It was then that Federation President Duan Muke. Everyone around him stopped their discussion and raised their heads to look at Duan Muke. Senior Mo Gaozi has already searched the entire solar system, and the Federation array formation has been activated this whole time. Despite that, we haven't found any clues. Based on Senior Mo Gaozi's assessment, the 3 extraterrestrial cultivators have either perished or have left the solar system through means that are unknown to us, Duan Muke said, his low voice ringing out in the conference room. The chances of them perishing are low, but it's still possible. After all, within this solar system exist things that we cannot comprehend, some strange mysterious powers. The possibility of them having escaped the solar system is greater. If that is the case, that means that we might be facing greater threats in the future. Regardless, there's no reason to keep the solar system array formation activated. However, as a lesson from the Mercury crisis, the greater array formations for the respective planets should be activated fully at all times. As Duan Muke said that, his expression remained unchanged. His thoughts were indiscernible. Those around him seemed deep in thought, but no one said a word. He glanced at everyone, then laughed suddenly. He knew that even if certain things remained unspoken, they would still be heard by those sat there. After all, they were all experienced strategists. It might seem that Duan Muke was prepared to deactivate the greater array formation and lower the threat level. However, he had also secretly spoken to Senior Mo Gaozi, who had harbored goodwill all these years. They planned to use such a method to lure the 3 extraterrestrial cultivators out. They planned to wait for them to reappear. As a result, Mo Gao's search wouldn't end yet. However, even though he believed that the Federation wouldn't have traitors who would betray the entire species, he still decided to be cautious and guard against the possibility of someone in their midst colluding with the extraterrestrial cultivators. He hadn't shared the full details of his plans. He had, in fact, secretly put in place greater preventive measures. Having spoken his piece, Duan Muke was about to get up and end the summit. It was then that an extremely handsome middle-aged man from the 5-generation Sky clan laughed suddenly. "Comrade Duan Muke, since the important matters have been decided, and the solar system array formation will be deactivated, then it means that everything will be returning to normal. Should we then talk about the matter of promoting the city status of the new Martian city?" The person who had spoken was the head of the Chen family in the 5-generation Sky clan, Chen Mu's father. As soon as he said that, the other clan leaders in the 5-generation Sky clan nodded. The head of the Zhou family, especially, said with a smile, "The new Martian city is an extremely important asset, but its current scale is unable to support the excavation of the divine armament. There are also unknown security issues regarding its defenses. I support the proposal to promote its status to a special regional city." After the 5-generation Sky clan representatives spoke in succession, the Grand Elder from the Galactic Dusk sect also smiled faintly and nodded. The Galactic Dusk sect extends their support for this matter. Soon, the sect lord of the Plume Manifestation Carnate sect also touched his chin. He stared at the 5-generation Sky clan, then at the 4 Dao colleges. He supported the proposal as well. The Trilunaris Corporation didn't speak, and the Senate was the same. Lin Yu had a slight frown on his forehead, narrowing his eyes as he glanced towards the Ethereal Dao College. The expression of the Ethereal Dao College sect lord seemed slightly strange in his eyes. He kept lowering his head as if he was reading something. As for the other 3 Dao colleges, the sect lord from the White Deer Dao College, especially, snorted but didn't say anything. The matter about promoting the status of the new Martian city had been set in stone. The various political forces had reached a consensus. They had divided the various posts in the special regional city amongst themselves as well. If not for the appearance of the extraterrestrial cultivators, this matter would have been a done deal. Even the governor of the Martian colony was expressionless. However, no one had noticed that she had lowered her head earlier. She seemed to have taken a look at her voice transmission ring. Finally, with the support of the great majority, the promotion of the new Martian city's status was decided. Duan Muke didn't stop the motion. He simply concealed the faint devious look in his Dharma body's eyes. Since the matter of the special regional city has been decided, the next matter would be to decide the city lord of the new special regional city. The Martian colony governor, who hadn't said a single word earlier, suddenly spoke. The candidate must be level-headed and have a core formation realm cultivation. This is unfortunate for Wang Baoli. He is a good kid, but he is not at the core formation realm. The Zhou family head from the 5-generation Sky clan shook his head and sighed. "We might be old, but we still have to support the Federation and give the next generation enough time to grow into their talents and powers. Especially Wang Baoli, who has shown such potential. We cannot take up his precious time, which can be better spent on cultivation." As these people spoke hypocritical words, the sect lord of the Ethereal Dao College suddenly slammed his fist on the table and roared. "Wang Baoli has made undeniable and great contributions to the Federation and to Mars. He built the new Martian city from scratch. I propose that the Federation set a precedent and allow Wang Baoli to become the city lord of the special regional city. There's no need for such agitation, sect lord of the Ethereal Dao College. I agree that Wang Baoli is indeed exemplary, but rules are rules. How could we simply amend them like that? If Wang Baoli's cultivation was at the core formation realm, I would support him as well, but the Martian special regional city is closely tied with the divine armament. This is no joking matter. Sect Lord, you shouldn't allow your personal feelings to affect decisions regarding the welfare of the Federation," the Chen family head of the 5-generation Sky clan said coolly. The pitch of his voice wasn't high. However, the harshness of his tone rang clearly through his words. "You," the Ethereal Dao College sect lord's face darkened and then paled, then darkened again as he tightened his fists. He had nothing to say to that. I can understand what the Ethereal Dao College sect lord is feeling. Wang Baoli is indeed the best candidate, but his cultivation doesn't meet the requirements. Besides, based on Federation laws, the city lord of a special regional city would have to join the Senate. He would also have to be at least a secondary rank 2 noble. One of the requirements of a secondary rank 2 noble is a core formation realm cultivation. The Grand Elder of the Galactic Dusk sect sitting at one side shook his head and sighed. That's the principle of the matter. The 5-generation Sky Clan, the Galactic Dusk sect, and the other supporters started to sigh. Those from the 5-generation Sky Clan were especially hypocritical in their expressions of pity. Just as they were about to declare that they had reached a consensus on whom the new city lord was to be, suddenly, the Martian city governor, who had been standing at one side, said coolly, with no expression on her face. I just received news. As you've all agreed, the best person for the job, who unfortunately lacked sufficient cultivation, is Wang Baoli. He just ended his seclusion. He has reached the core formation realm. Chapter 472, The President's Autobiography. Chapter 472, The President's Autobiography. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. His reached the core formation realm. Those words were like a slight breeze passing by the ears of the group discussing the best and most suitable candidate to take over supervision of the Martian Special Regional City. It stirred gentle ripples, and the discussion about potential city lord candidates continued for a few more moments. Finally, the voices faded. The various important figures gradually froze, then abruptly turned towards the expressionless Martian colony governor. There was a moment when the entire hall descended into a deathly silence. It was during this silence that the ethereal Tao College sect lord coughed. The sound of his cough echoed in the quiet halls. His voice, which the rest found annoying then, drifted amongst the group. I've also just received the news. Now that Wang Baoli, whom everyone has agreed is the best choice for city lord of the special regional city, has reached the core formation realm, I thank all my fellow Taoists present for your recommending him to the post. I shouldn't be displaying such favoritism, but for the good of the Federation, and since everyone here approves of and believes so strongly in this disciple of my sect, as a sect lord, I naturally am not in a position to decline or refuse the recommendation. Esteemed President, on behalf of the Ethereal Tao College and the 4 great Tao Colleges, I recommend that Wang Baoli take over as City Lord of the Martian Special Regional City. In addition, given his contributions to the Federation and to Mars, I believe he should be promoted to a secondary rank 2 noble. The Ethereal Tao College sect lord said suddenly. As his words rang out, a late-stage core formation realm cultivation erupted from his person. It was like a hurricane that spun inside the great halls. His words were filled with an overpowering aura that he hadn't had earlier. This was because he wasn't only speaking for the Ethereal Tao College but also the 4 great Tao Colleges. His words meant that the other 3 Tao Colleges couldn't refute him if the alliance of the 4 Tao Colleges was to remain strong. Regardless of their internal conflicts and infighting, they had to present a united front in such summits. Should there be any opposing voices amongst the 4 Tao Colleges, it would create a tremendous adverse impact on the 4 great Tao Colleges. There would even be a fracture in the alliance between the Ethereal Tao College and the other Tao Colleges. In addition, what the Ethereal Tao College sect lord had said was indeed true. Regardless of anything else, Wang Baoli was a member of the 4 Tao Colleges. That was why the sect lords of the other 3 Tao Colleges, after staring at the Ethereal Tao College sect lord, didn't challenge his words. A strange feeling began to rise within them. The Ethereal Tao College sect lord at this moment was different from the familiar sect lord that they had known. He had changed. The sect lord of the White Deer Tao College was silent for a few moments. He might dislike Wang Baoli, but he spoke immediately as well. I, too, recommend Wang Baoli to be promoted to a secondary rank 2 noble and take over as city lord of the special regional city. His recommendation was followed by the recommendations of the other 2 Tao Colleges. Lin Yu smiled lightly and became the first senator to support the proposal. Witnessing Lin Yu's declaration of support, the remaining members of the Senate looked at one another, then at the head senator. There was no expression on the head senator's face. However, he glanced towards Lin Yu, then smiled slightly. He nodded and said, "This is a great outcome." The expressions on the representatives of the 5-generation Sky Clan, the Galactic Dusk sect, and the Plume Manifestation Carnate sect changed then. The head senator's words carried great weight, which was why they began to frown. The few clan leaders of the five-generation Sky clan felt an indescribable resentment surface within them. They were frustrated beyond measure. Wang Baoli had picked the best time for his breakthrough to happen. They still had to maintain their reputation, so there was no way they could go back on what they had just said. They were thinking about how to address this matter, perhaps using another approach after first setting this matter aside for later discussion, when the representative from the Trilunaris Corporation suddenly laughed. He was an elder who hadn't participated in the discussion earlier. He was the younger brother of Master Jin, who was the head of the Trilunaris Corporation. The Trilunaris Corporation will increase its investments in the special regional city. As soon as he said that, the pressure on the five-generation Sky clan and gang grew. The Trilunaris Corporation might not have explicitly made a stand, but the fact that the elder hadn't mentioned increasing their investments earlier and had only done so now showed very clearly where they stood. There was no need to put that in words. The Martian colony governor didn't say anything. However, they knew that she need not say anything. Her position on the matter had been made clear the moment she had announced that Wang Baoli had reached the core formation realm. This was the same with the military. They didn't state their position on the matter, but the seeming smiles on their faces seemed to hide deep, unfathomable meaning. The sudden turn of the tables caught the five-generation Sky clan by surprise. The final blow came from Federation President Duan Muke. Duan Muke didn't give the five-generation Sky clan a chance to speak and simply waved his hand. Credit must be rewarded, and an able man must be put to good use. I've said before that the Federation needs 100 Wang Baoles. Today, I'm amending my statement. The Federation needs 10,000 Wang Baoles. Declare to the people of the Federation that Wang Baoli will be given the title of a secondary rank 2 noble and promoted to the City Lord of the Martian Special Regional City. He will also join the Senate as its 18th senator. Federation President Duan Muke announced decisively before he rose to his feet and ended the summit. The pupils of the various clan leaders of the five-generation Sky clan contracted. They sensed something was amiss. Duan Muke had decided too quickly on the matter. They looked at one another, deep in thought. The other political forces also had considering looks on their faces, and they all carried their thoughts with them as they left. Their projected forms soon disappeared in the great conference halls. Finally, Duan Muke rose to his feet and walked across the vast halls, towards the door. His back was akin to a sharp sword. With every step he took, the spirit energy exuding from his person rippled. It was as if he was holding his cultivation back. Soon, the time for a breakthrough is near, it's just a pity that I'm still one step behind the old guy. Duan Muke shook his head and smiled. He had seen the considering looks in the eyes of those who had left, but he paid them no heed. He believed that they would soon find out. There were 3 reasons that Duan Muke had made such a decisive decision. The first was that he had great expectations of Wang Baoli, though not to the extent that he would give him a hand up. The second was that the current Federation needed a hero. After the Mercury tragedy, the people of the Federation hadn't yet recovered from their sorrow and worry. The Federation needed to reshape its image in the eyes of its people. It needed to have a hero that everyone knew. This hero would draw the attention of the people and rouse them into uniting. Wang Baoli's image didn't really match what he had been looking for. He might come from a family background that would invite no complaints, and he might have climbed to the top, step by step, in the eyes of the people. However, he hadn't done enough to warrant Duan Muke picking him in the end. If there had only been these 2 reasons, Duan Muke might have delayed this matter and used it as a bargaining chip. He would wait for both sides to make their bids, then as he recalibrated the balanced relationships amongst the various political forces, he would reap as much as he could from this selection of the Martian Special Regional City's City Lord. However, with the addition of the 3rd reason, everything would change. The 3rd reason formed the basis for everything. With the 3rd reason, he had to reassess the importance of the first 2 reasons. Without the 3rd reason, nothing would have happened. This 3rd reason was, the Grand Supreme Elder of the Ethereal Tao College, the former Federation President who had led the Federation in the way of founding the Cultivation Era. The former most powerful person in the Federation, Li Xingguan, was about to achieve a breakthrough from the core formation realm and enter the nascent soul realm. The Ethereal Tao College might have been able to hide this from others, but they couldn't hide this from Duan Muke, who was also about to achieve his own breakthrough. He had long since felt, indistinctly, a fearsome presence within the ethereal Tao College that was unnoticed by others and that seemed about to rise towering into the skies. It was because of this that the ethereal Tao College sect lord had a basis for his newfound confidence. It was the basis of the overpowering sense of authority exuding from his person. The construction of the teleportation array formation can be sped up, Du and Muke said softly as he walked into the distance. The summit ended, and the announcement of Wang Baoli's appointment was made. Wang Baoli, having returned to the new Martian city and realizing that nothing had changed since his disappearance, finally heard the news that he was waiting for. Wang Baoli burst out into happy and loud laughter when he received the news. He was beyond excited. He could feel the distance separating him from the Federation President's office closing with every step he took. It had been such an unreachable goal, but now it was almost within reach. From now on, I'm going to start on my autobiography. When it's done, I'll use it to tell the future generations how the legendary Federation President Wang Baoli relied on his own hard work and perseverance, worked diligently, step by step, without relying on anyone else, relying only on his own sweat and tears, to become the fated son of Lady Fortune. I've even thought of a name. It'll be called the President's Autobiography. Wang Baoli laughed maniacally. He felt that he had reached a peak in his life. As Wang Baoli basked in a joy that was beyond words, the media agencies across the entire Federation began simultaneously promoting Wang Baoli like crazy. Every city on every Federation planet in the solar system flashed the poster of Wang Baoli on all available projection screens immediately. An excited voice was accompanied by grand music as it declared Wang Baoli's appointment. The youngest core formation realm cultivator in the whole of Federation history. The youngest secondary rank 2 noble who was a city lord. The youngest member of the Senate. All of a sudden, Wang Baoli's name spread across the entire Federation. He became a household name. There was no one who didn't know his name. He became the new rising star of the Federation. Chapter 473, A Glorious Homecoming. Chapter 473, A Glorious Homecoming. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. As the various media outlets and the Spirit Internet continued to promote Wang Baoli in every city on every planet of the entire Federation, stories about his childhood began to surface as those who knew the stories began sharing said stories. I'm the ex-husband of City Lord Wang Baoli's elementary school teacher. I could tell since he was a young kid that he had the potential to be a hero. He studied hard in class and loved to help out the weaker female students. This is clearly the trait of the exemplary. He even actively got the other students together to lose weight. What a great kid. He did that to strengthen their bodies so that they might contribute to the prosperity of the Federation. I'm City Lord Wang Baoli's good friend. I sat behind him in class for 3 years. He was an inspiration to me those 3 years. He had a great impact on my life. It was Wang Baoli who taught me to never stop improving myself. This is all in the past, but City Lord Wang Baoli once courted me. I didn't want to affect his future, that was why I silently wept as I turned him down. But now, I just want to say, Wang Baoli, I'm here in Phoenix City waiting for you. All sorts of tidbits began to be revealed through the media outlets and drew great interest from the populace. Contradictory opinions surfaced as well. There were those who said that Wang Baoli was a pervert. There were some who said that since he had been a kid, Wang Baoli had enjoyed making friends with the powerful for his personal gains. There were also those who said that he had been a bully when he had been in school. Such news was drowned out by the sea of compliments when they first surfaced, hardly making a ripple. A host on the Spirit Internet also contributed greatly to this series of promotions. Old friends, do you still remember me, Little Daoist? I graduated from the ethereal Tao College and had a series of close interactions with the City Lord Wang Baoli. I even reported many exclusive news stories then. Today, please stay tuned to my channel as I bring you into the inner world of City Lord Wang Baoli, and as we get to know the City Lord. Little Daoist, who had been a host at the ethereal Tao College, seized this opportunity and returned to college again. He revisited many places on campus and, with great exaggeration, reported what could be seen as exclusive information about Wang Baoli's student life on campus. It was a hit. Such an explosive promotion fulfilled what the Federation set out to achieve, which was to distract the citizens' attention. The Mercury incident sank to the depths of the people's minds. It no longer hovered near the surface, before their eyes and at the top of their heads. Wang Baoli also found out through the Spirit Internet, and countless voice transmissions that the Federation was carrying out widespread promotion regarding him. He became excited, spending most of his time every day logged on to the Spirit Internet and reading articles about himself. He would pat his tummy as he snacked, and his mood would soar to the heavens. Perhaps it was because he had been in too good a mood and had overeaten, or that he hadn't been exercising, or because Li Wanna's cultivation was nearing a breakthrough and she had gone into seclusion, resulting in her being unable to help him exercise, but Wang Baoli felt a change in sensation as he patted his tummy. Based on his rich experience in losing weight, he could tell that he had gained weight again. The thought of being fat was akin to being hit by a nascent soul realm cultivator with all his strength. Wang Baoli shuddered immediately. He wanted to throw aside the half-eaten drumstick in his hand. However, after some thought, he stood before the mirror and carefully examined himself and his figure, which still seemed somewhat slim. He was torn. This is my last drumstick today. After finishing it, I'll start to lose weight tomorrow. Wang Baoli gritted his teeth. It was as if he had a deep grudge against the drumstick. He finished it within 2 to 3 mouthfuls. After that, he sat down forcefully and took a deep breath, a look of determination in his eyes. As the most handsome man in the whole of the Federation, I have to maintain my image. Such stress. Wang Baoli lowered his head and stared at his tummy. He realized that he had let go of himself too much in the past few days. Even though the new city had risen to become a special regional city and his workload had increased considerably, he had experienced a few city expansions previously and had also resolved the problem of the beast tides from the catacombs. Everything was going according to plan. Jin Duoming and the others also received a promotion in their ranks and appointments, causing the level of their authority to grow. As long as everything went according to plan, he would be left with plenty of leisure time. I can't let myself relax. Wang Baoli rubbed at his forehead. He thought for a while, then decided to make a trip back to Earth. He had the intention when he had returned. However, because of Li Wanna's seclusion and the recent promotion in status for the city, Wang Baoli had decided to supervise the city administration for some time first. My lightning Dao is only at the Foundation Establishment realm level. I need to return to the Ethereal Dao College to select a new mystic art at the core formation realm. It's a pity that the mystic arts inside the Dark Dream all had something to do with Dark Qi. Even those that have nothing to do with Dark Qi can only be practiced when I reach the Spirit Immortal realm. They're looking down on the core formation realm. Wang Baoli sighed. Even though it was important to return to the college and pick up his next mystic art, if that had been the only matter, Wang Baoli wouldn't have needed to make a personal visit. He had been speaking to his parents via transmissions every now and then, but it had been some time since they had last met. That was why Wang Baoli was thinking about returning to Earth and visiting his parents, and he would make a trip to the college and pick up his next mystic art while he was there. He had another thing that he was considering as well. Wang Baoli was wondering if his parents should continue to stay in Phoenix City and if that was still appropriate. Even though it would be difficult for his aging parents to leave their hometown, with the rise in his cultivation and status, and with his increased knowledge and understanding of this world, Wang Baoli knew that while the Federation might appear to be safe, there were still possibilities of catastrophes like the Mercury incident happening again. Besides, even if the Federation administration seemed to be relatively stable, Wang Baoli knew that there were many who envied him, held a grudge against him, or had conflicting interests. Wang Baoli wasn't confident of the safety that the Phoenix City could provide. His heart wouldn't be set at ease even if the Ethereal Dao College sent people to protect his parents secretly. I'll discuss it with Mom. It'll be best if they could move to Ethereal City. It'll be safer for them that way. Wang Baoli made up his mind. He would return and discuss it with his mother. As for what his father thought, he wouldn't put too much weight on that. Based on his understanding, since the neighboring aunts had started addressing him as Old Wang, his status in their family had fallen to an extreme low. I pity Dad. The world is harsh. Old Li, Old Lu, and Old Zhong next door are all fine, but once they mention Old Wang next door. Wang Baoli shook his head and sighed. He submitted a request to the Martian colony governor, then gathered Kong Dao, Jin Duoming, Lin Qianhao and the others for instruction. Soon, that day in the evening, his subordinates saw him off as he boarded a celestial cruiser that belonged to the Martian Special Regional City and left the planet. As an important secondary rank 2 noble, every move that Wang Baoli made needed to be reported to the Federation. The Federation immediately got hold of his calendar. The Martian military even arranged for a protection detail of 4 cruisers to accompany him on this trip. The 4 cruisers circled the main cruiser as they dashed through space. As they passed the moon, 3 cruisers that belonged to the lunar base joined the fleet under Federation orders. 8 cruisers sped towards Earth. As they continued to approach, Wang Baoli, standing inside the main cruiser, first kicked the donkey that was licking the floorboard with a contemplative look, as if it wanted to take a bit out of the floor, then gazed outside the window. As the blue planet approached, thoughts of home and homesickness began to show in his eyes. He recalled when he had first left many years ago. He had only just reached the Foundation establishment realm and had only been a secondary rank 5 noble. He had carried his dreams aboard a cruiser to Mars, entered the education sector, and braved countless trials to arrive at where he was now. Now, he was a secondary rank 2 noble. His cultivation had achieved a breakthrough, and he had entered the core formation realm. His status and rank of now and many years ago seemed worlds apart. "I'm going home." Wang Baoli took a deep breath. The cruiser that he was in was surrounded by 7 other escorting cruisers as they raced towards Earth. Soon, they entered the Earth's Great Array Formation and were pulled in, entering the atmosphere before speeding towards the spaceport in the Federation capital. The Federation had made arrangements for a reception party for him at the Skyport, a grand reception with over 100 people. They looked, smiling, as the cruisers landed. The rumbling roars of the engines resounded in the port. The first to get out were the 100-odd combat cultivators who had been inside the 7 escort cruisers and had guarded Wang Baoli during the journey to Earth. They raced out of the cruisers and secured the area. After ensuring that everything was safe and secure, the doors of the main cruiser opened gradually. As soon as it opened, Wang Baoli, who had just smoothened his attire and put on a serious expression, slowly walked out. The donkey followed behind him, clearly excited. It kept looking around, as everything on Earth was new to its eyes. "City Lord Wang, welcome back to Earth." As soon as Wang Baoli appeared, those in the reception party immediately bowed and greeted Wang Baoli. Leading them was a middle-aged man with a cultivation at the core formation realm. There was warmth in his smile as he cupped his fists and saluted Wang Baoli. Chapter 474, Going Home. Chapter 474, Going Home. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Even though Wang Baoli didn't know the other man's exact rank and office, he had been working in the Federation administration for such a long time. He was long used to the social etiquette required of him at such events. After stepping off the cruiser, he first stood and returned a bow to those who had greeted him. Then, he cupped his fists and saluted the middle-aged man with a smile on his face. The leading middle-aged man saw his reciprocal bow and smiled lightly. He had heard Wang Baoli's name many times. Now that he was finally meeting him, he could tell from this small detail that Wang Baoli was someone who knew how to conduct himself and play the crowd. He liked such people. Even though they were more complicated, they suited the current Federation climate. As a smile surfaced on Wang Baoli's face, he too laughed aloud. He took a few quick steps forward and approached Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli got to know who he was after a brief cordial exchange. He was also a secondary rank 2 noble. However, unlike Wang Baoli, who had been sent into space as an ambassador to colonize new lands, he was the head secretary of the Federation President's office. He was akin to the capital city's chief minister, and the loyal subordinate to the Federation President. His reception was an expression of the Federation President's attitude towards Wang Baoli. After realizing who he was, Wang Baoli also realized what his presence meant. His smile widened as they chatted merrily. After clarifying why Wang Baoli was heading towards Phoenix City, the middle-aged man immediately made arrangements for a cruiser to send him over. "Even though we are tasked with protecting the whole of humanity and the Federation, we are still cultivators at heart. We are unable to travel through space, that's why we use cruisers, but now that I'm back on my home planet, there's no need for cruisers. I'll simply fly there. Wang Baoli smiled as he turned down the offer tactfully. The middle-aged man gave his answer some thought and didn't insist further. Wang Baoli instructed the combat cultivators who had escorted him back to Earth to await further orders in the capital city. He then bade farewell to the head secretary. With a single step and a wave of his hand, a flying sword flew out from his storage bracelet. He lifted one foot and got onto the flying sword before it dashed through the sky like a sudden rainbow arc and sped into the heavens. The reception party gazed from the grounds beneath as Wang Baoli stood on his flying sword. With the wind in his face, his hair stirred. Despite his rotund figure, he still appeared as if he were an immortal wandering the lands, ethereal and without a tinge of the earthly desires and needs that ruled the ordinary folk. In that manner, he disappeared gradually into the distance. We cultivators should be just like that, the head secretary of the Federation President's office smiled and said. His words resounded in the air, and envy colored everyone's eyes when they heard what he had said. After all, only a core formation realm cultivator could travel the skies via long-distance flight. A Foundation Establishment realm cultivator might be able to do the same for short distances, but once the journey lengthened, they would find it difficult to sustain such a mode of travel. I wonder when we'll get to be just like City Lord Wang Baoli, traveling between cities on a flying sword. The crowd sighed and slowly dispersed. As for Wang Baoli, he was currently on his flying sword and had just left the parameters of the capital city, speeding towards Phoenix City. His mood was merry, and his spirits high. He hadn't chosen to travel on a cruiser because he felt that, as he was already a core formation realm cultivator, it would be beneath his status to still take the cruiser. Core formation realm cultivators should be flying. That's the only method that befits their status. Wang Baoli was brimming with happiness and pleasure. He increased his speed against the incoming winds. He stirred a series of rumbling as he shot through the air, causing the beasts on land to freeze as they listened to the thunderous booms resounding above their heads. The core formation realm cultivation that Wang Baoli exuded drove the ancient martial realm and true breath realm beasts cowering, too frightened to lift their heads from the ground. When he passed some of the smaller cities, the people in the cities also heard the loud thundering in the sky. When they looked up, they saw an indistinct figure dashing across the heavens like a bolt of lightning. Gasps rose to the air. In the Federation, it was common to see a cultivator at the ancient martial realm. True breath realm cultivators were also regular sightings. One might even cross paths with a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator. Core formation realm cultivators, though, were all important figures and numbered in the few. Rarely could anyone see one in person. Wang Baoli's flight via flying sword naturally drew too much attention during his journey back home. Even though there were many who didn't know Wang Baoli's actual level of cultivation and didn't get a clear look of him, the Foundation Establishment realm cultivators inside the cities could still clearly sense the overpowering authority that exuded from the fleeting figure passing over their cities. It was a power that made them quake in their boots. A core formation realm cultivator. There's a core formation realm senior flying past on his sword. Gasps of shock resounded in the air. As Wang Baoli flew faster and faster, like a lightning bolt snaking through the air, he even managed to glimpse a few long-distance passenger cruisers as he passed them by. As he overtook them, he would catch the shocked looks in the passengers' eyes. News began to appear on the Spirit Internet and even on some media outlets. It didn't take too long before Wang Baoli began to regret his decision. He had imagined a flight via flying sword being an incredibly enjoyable experience. However, when he finally did it, especially over such a long distance, Wang Baoli got to know what it meant to have violent winds lashing him in the face, and what it meant to feel extreme, piercing cold. The faster he flew, the stronger the winds got, and the stronger the resistance became. The idea of having the wind in one's face might seem somewhat poetic, but after a while, the winds became a chill that pierced deep into one's bones. If he were to activate his cultivation now as a protective barrier, he would be expending even more spirit chi. Wang Baoli muttered to himself, then decided to give up halfway on the plan to fly the entire way home. Compared to showing off his abilities, he felt that comfort was of greater priority. He corrected his earlier mistaken views that had arisen due to his just reaching the core formation realm, and becoming a secondary rank 2 noble, and hurriedly pulled out his cruiser. Sat comfortably inside, he pulled out a bag of snacks and began snacking as he steered the cruiser towards Phoenix City. While there was a considerable distance separating Phoenix City and the capital city, with the augmentation of Wang Baoli's cultivation, the cruiser's speed increased considerably. The entire journey took but 2 hours, and Phoenix City soon came within sight. There were hundreds of people waiting for him outside the city, but Wang Baoli wasn't surprised to see that. Having read the high officials' autobiographies, he knew that as a secondary rank 2 noble, and having just returned to the Phoenix City, the city lord would have to receive him personally. If not, it would mean that something had gone wrong somewhere. When Wang Baoli's cruiser landed outside Phoenix City, he was warmly received by the city officials, who were led by Liu Daobin's father. Liu Daobin's father was leading the reception party because he had been promoted to the city lord of Phoenix City. Naturally, this had a lot to do with Liu Daobin, who was Wang Baoli's trusted subordinate, and Liu Daobin's appointment on Mars. After a round of warm reception, Liu Daobin's father, aware that Wang Baoli had returned to reunite with his parents, didn't take up too much of Wang Baoli's time. He had ensured that the reception was brief while sufficiently expressing their attitude regarding Wang Baoli's return. Wang Baoli was pleased as well, as he was also unwilling to spend too much time here. His heart was already looking forward to home, and he quickly withdrew from the group and headed home. The area that his home was located had changed, and it was no longer the same as what he had remembered. There were many more unfamiliar faces around him, most of them at the True Breath realm, though he saw 3 Foundation Establishment realm cultivators. They appeared from around a corner, dressed in the robes of the ethereal Tao College. They cupped their fists and saluted Wang Baoli. They were the disciples charged with protecting Wang Baoli's family by the ethereal Tao College. There were also city guards surrounding the residential area, which was clearly very well protected. Wang Baoli nodded. He cupped his fists and saluted the guards before walking towards his home. As soon as he approached, he could hear his father's voice, and the unhappiness in it, resounding inside their house. "What's wrong with me receiving my own son? That little Liu, he's too fixated on formalities. The moment I expressed my intention of receiving my own son, he had a look of panic on his face. He went on about how they can do it, and how he was worried that Baoli might come to the wrong conclusions if I went. Stop that. He has a difficult job as well. Besides, you're only the head of an archaeology team. For a city lord to show you so much respect whenever he sees you, what else do you want?" The voice of Wang Baoli's mother rang out as well. The tone of voice seemed normal, but as soon as she spoke, his father didn't say another word. Wang Baoli's face split into a wide grin when he heard his parents' conversation. At that moment, he forgot that he was a secondary rank 2 noble, that he was the city lord of a special regional city, and that he was a core formation realm cultivator. He had returned to who he had been as he pushed the door open and shouted, "Mom, Dad, I'm home." As the door was flung open, the first thing that appeared before Wang Baoli was a couch. His father sat on the couch, his arms crossed, while his mother wore an apron and had just placed a plate of pig's trotters on the dining table. They turned their heads and saw Wang Baoli at the door. "You little rascal, why did you greet your mom before your dad?" Wang Baoli's father was delighted at the sight of his son. He was about to get to his feet when he sensed that something was wrong. He straightened his face and asked as he glared. However, as soon as he glared at Wang Baoli's mother immediately glared at him. "Quick, get the food in the pot out." Wang Baoli's mother ignored her husband and walked in front of Wang Baoli, pinched his round face with pain in her eyes. "Baoli, is the food on Mars not to your taste? Look how thin you've gotten. Your old mother almost didn't recognize you." Chapter 475, A Partner. Chapter 475, A Partner. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli watched as his mother came up to him and was about to pinch his cheeks. He sucked in a deep breath of air in fear and hastily suppressed the cultivation inside his body. He relaxed the muscles on his face so that his mother wouldn't receive any backlash from pinching his cheeks. It was somewhat challenging, but he was truly worried that his current cultivation and physical body might cause harm to his parents. Fortunately, Wang Baoli's reflexes were quick. As his cultivation was suppressed and the muscles on his face relaxed, his mother pinched his cheeks without noticing anything amiss. The aching and pain in her eyes sent warmth unfurling inside Wang Baoli. This was a warmth that couldn't be felt on Mars. Even when he had his friends with him, the feeling he had then wouldn't be able to compare with this current heat. He grinned and patted his tummy. "Mom, look, there's so much meat on this tummy. Don't worry, I won't lose weight. Your tummy's grown smaller." Wang Baoli's mother sighed. She pulled Wang Baoli onto the couch and began to interrogate him about his life on Mars, asking for all the details. Love filled her eyes, and Wang Baoli felt a great warmth and began to relax. "A girlfriend? Of course. Mom, let me tell you. I have so many girlfriends. Too many, in fact. They're so troublesome. Someone to take care of me? Mom, I'm a secondary rank 2 noble now. There are plenty of people waiting to kiss my ass and do things for me. I even have my own guards. Don't worry. Ah, Mom, I realized when I arrived that you look younger now. Where did you get these clothes from? They look really fashionable." Wang Baoli unleashed his skills at changing the topic and instantly shifted his mother's attention away. He saw how effective it was and began to pile on more compliments. In the end, Wang Baoli's mother laughed and scoldingly smacked Wang Baoli on the head. The love in her eyes brightened. She didn't even spare a glance at her husband, who had been taking the dishes out from the kitchen. Wang Baoli could only sigh and feel sympathy for his father. Soon, all the dishes were placed on the dining table. The family of 3 finally sat down together to have their first reunion meal after years of separation. Wang Baoli led the conversation, and the atmosphere was warmed by his mother's endless laughter, which was punctuated by the dissatisfied snorts from his father. The topic of conversation soon turned from Wang Baoli to grandchildren. Wang Baoli's mother seemed anxious about this particular topic. "Baoli, you say you have so many girlfriends. Why didn't you bring one home this round? You should settle down quickly. No, you follow me tomorrow, I'm bringing you matchmaking. I think Deputy City Lord Shu's daughter is quite a good match. She's especially friendly whenever I see her and seems the sort to bear sons." Wang Baoli was stunned when he heard that. He had always thought matchmaking to be such an embarrassing thing, especially for someone like him. He was the most handsome person in the entire Federation. What need did he have for matchmaking? Nonsense. Before Wang Baoli could speak, his father placed his chopsticks down and lifted his jaw. He said solemnly, "Baoli is a senator now, and the city lord of a special regional city. How can we joke around with his marriage? Old Wang, you've become quite impressive. You dare to raise your voice at me now? A mere leader of an archaeology team who's basking in the glory of my son, how dare you pretend to be a somebody in front of me?" Wang Baoli's mother was always kind and loving to Wang Baoli, but when speaking to her husband, she was extremely stern and fierce. At present, her eyes were popping out as she glared. Wang Baoli's father shuddered and dared not talk back, only lowering his head and muttering, "That's my son too. Shut up and eat." Wang Baoli's eyes squinted as he smiled at the sight. He was overcome with emotion. Suddenly, he felt as if he had changed. In the past, he hadn't had any special feelings when he visited home. This time though, he could feel a reluctance to leave them when the time came. He suddenly wondered if he had been too busy working towards his ambition and had neglected the old folks at home. He did frequently speak to his parents. He had also gotten people to send over pills to them quite a few times. Even though his parents lacked the talents for cultivation, with the aid of these pills, they had managed to reach the peak of the ancient martial realm. To a certain degree, this could also increase their lifespan. But Wang Baoli was suddenly very afraid. He feared the cruel passing of time as he continued his cultivation. One day, perhaps he might enter seclusion, only to leave it and find the entire world changed, and the people he had known gone. "Little Missy, are there pills or rare natural ingredients in this world that can increase the lifespan of an ordinary person?" Wang Baoli asked quietly in his head. Since little Missy had said she was going to return to slumber in the dark artifact, she hadn't said a single word. When Wang Baoli had first left the dark artifact and tried reaching out to her, she hadn't responded. Now though, little Missy's voice echoed softly in his head. It was colored with slight sorrow and nostalgia, as well as a certain empathy. Yes. Wang Baoli breathed in deeply. He smiled. As long as they existed, he would find a way to get his hands on them. This would make his worries go away. He looked at his parents, then said as he laughed. Mom, why don't we move? Let's move next to the Ethereal Dao College in Ethereal City. Wang Baoli's father heard that and was about to say something when Wang Baoli's mother snorted. He hurriedly lowered his head and continued eating rice. He followed exactly what his wife had said and only ate rice, not even touching the other dishes. Baoli, I plan to discuss this with you even if you didn't raise this matter. It no longer feels as comfortable staying in Phoenix City. Moving away sounds like a good idea. Wang Baoli's mother thought for a while, then nodded her agreement. She didn't ask the exact reason, as she was already aware. Her son was so exemplary and held such a high-ranking post. As parents, there were times such as this when all they needed to do was not cause their children any trouble. Since their son said they should move, then they would move. She also considered the matter of matchmaking. There would be more potential daughters-in-law to choose from in such a big city such as Ethereal City. She would have so many more options as compared to Phoenix City. They finished a heartwarming dinner. Night descended. Wang Baoli returned to his small bedroom and lay on his small bed, gazing at the moon outside. He smiled and didn't meditate or train, simply allowing himself to relax and shut his eyes. Then, he dreamed, something he hadn't done for a very long time. Time passed. On the 5th day, after his parents had dealt with everything, the entire family boarded Wang Baoli's cruiser and moved away. Despite how reluctant Lu Daobin's father was to see them go, he knew that with Wang Baoli's current status and cultivation, it was no longer appropriate for his parents to continue living in the city. Setting aside all other concerns, their safety would pose a problem. Phoenix City was, after all, a small city. It couldn't compare with Ethereal City, which was next to the Ethereal Dao College. It was nearly a stronghold and almost impenetrable. Because of Wang Baoli's status, his parents would receive a great deal of protection in Ethereal City. They wouldn't experience any hardship for the rest of their lives. Having understood that, Wang Baoli's old parents pushed down the reluctance they felt at leaving. They boarded the cruiser with their son as they were sent off by a crowd of people. The cruiser rose and sped, roaring towards Ethereal City. Wang Baoli allowed the cruiser to fly at a leisurely pace. On the one hand, this was to ensure that his parents wouldn't experience any discomfort during the journey. On the other, while his father was part of an archaeology team and often left the city and ventured outside, his mother had never traveled to such far places in her entire life. Wang Baoli intended to make use of this chance to bring his parents around for a tour. With Wang Baoli's cultivation and status, while not entirely invincible, he still had the ability to protect his parents from coming to harm on Earth. The sorrow of departure dissipated from the elderly couple's hearts as the scenery of this Earth flashed across their eyes. They flew over mountain ranges and landed on a peak laden with snow. They melted the snow and brewed tea, stared at the layers of clouds in the heavens, and gazed at the blue lakes beneath the snow mountains. They moved past patches of forests. They saw birds and sniffed flowers in the deepest parts of the thick forests. They watched as what should have been vicious, fearsome beasts turn into obedient little puppies, showing their bellies and seeking their favor. They leaped over vast deserts and drank from the clear waters in the oasis within the deserts. The cruiser led the family of 3 speeding under the blue skies, weaving through clouds, and flying over mountains and forests. A life that belonged to a cultivator was unveiled, fractionally, before Wang Baoli's parents. Mom, when I was a kid, I said that I would bring you and Dad to travel the world. Wang Baoli looked at his parents' happy, smiling faces, and watched as they took photos of every place they had visited. He stood on the cruiser, happiness filling his heart. This was a bliss that surpassed the happiness of being promoted to a secondary rank too noble.